Transkript werde ich abschalten. Gut, ja, herzlich willkommen zum Experts Live Café. Ist schon ein bisschen länger her. Voriges Jahr hat es ja aus privaten Gründen nicht so hundertprozentig geklappt, aber wir werden jetzt wieder durchstarten. Ich freue mich schon. Heute 3 Sessions, 3 sehr spannende Sessions meines Erachtens nach. Ich freue mich wirklich schon sehr drauf, sehr irrsinnig drauf auf die Sessions und auch auf eventuelle Live-Demos. Vielleicht zu meiner Person. Mein Name ist Hannes oder Johannes Lagler-Gruener. Ich organisiere diese Experts Live Cafés mittlerweile schon seit ein paar Jahren. Meistens sind diese Experts Live Cafés hybrid, also wir haben immer virtuelle Teilnehmer, die teilnehmen oder mit dazu stoßen, beziehungsweise auch dementsprechend Locations, wo wir uns dann auch treffen, wo wir uns im Nachgang auch dann auch dementsprechend austauschen können. Heute reine virtuelle Session, hat auch private Gründe, deshalb wollte ich es nicht gleich jetzt da wieder hybrid machen. Es ist sehr einfach zeitlich nicht ausgegangen. Ja, ihr findet mich grundsätzlich überall. Also ich bin, Twitter heißt jetzt mittlerweile X, muss ich immer austauschen. Ich habe einen YouTube-Channel auch. Ihr findet mich natürlich auf meinem separaten oder privaten Blog, auch in LinkedIn und so weiter und so fort. Also wenn ihr meinen Namen eingibt in Google, dann wird einiges kommen und jederzeit und immer gerne vernetzen. Ich habe überhaupt kein Problem damit. Ja, kleine Spielregeln. Ist ja immer schön, wenn man ein bisschen Spielregeln nachher dazu nimmt. Dadurch, dass wir reine virtuelle Session haben, würde ich auch bitten, wenn möglich, die Webcam bitte an. Es ist halt immer einfacher für den Speaker, wenn man auch das Gegenüber nachher sieht und auch die Reaktion nachher dementsprechend sieht. Mobiltelefone in dem Fall egal, das ist ja bei einer Hybridveranstaltung relativ wichtig. Wenn ihr Fragen habt, bitte einfach in Chat schreiben, es sei denn, die Speaker sagen, okay, für sie ist es okay, dass sie auch unterbrochen werden beim Vortrag. Bitte aber jeder Speaker selbst entscheiden. Balash for you as well, if you want that the attendees have questions, or if the attendees have questions, then it's okay for you to interrupt your session. Please tell the attendees. If not, we are adding the information to the chat, and later on I will explain or ask you the questions. So it depends on you, what you prefer. Okay, ja, Reaktionen, gut, kann man natürlich auch jederzeit machen und so weiter und so fort. Gut, was haben wir heute? Beziehungsweise Meetups, wie ist es aufgebaut? Grundsätzlich planen wir wieder 1- bis 2-mal im Quartal Meetups zu machen. Die Meetups spezifizieren sich auf Cloud. Da sind wir eigentlich komplett offen, was ihr vortragen wollt. Also ich bin da komplett offen. Cloud, Azure Cloud und Security, vielleicht auch Hybrid Cloud, On-Premise, Azure Stack Local, also Azure Local oder was auch immer ihr wollt. Wenn wer was vortragen möchte, bitte einfach mir auf jl@expertslive.at schreiben oder vielleicht sind wir auch vernetzt in LinkedIn. Bitte kommt einfach auf mich zu, wenn ihr eine Idee habt. Reden wir drüber, plaudern wir drüber und absolut kein Thema. Was wir uns wünschen, ist nicht nur reine Theorie, sondern es wäre halt immer auch schön, wenn man es wirklich von der Praxis ein paar Demos auch dabei hätte. Wäre ziemlich cool. Session auf Deutsch oder Englisch. Spanisch kann ich ein bisschen, aber ich glaube, da werden wir nicht glücklich werden, aber Deutsch und Englisch ist absolut okay. Wir haben heute auch eine Session, die auf Englisch ist. Und ganz wichtig, wenn es hier Themen gibt, die Session werden grundsätzlich recorded. Wenn es ein Thema gibt, dass NDE-Informationen eventuell dabei sind, haben wir bis jetzt sehr selten gehabt, bitte einfach kurz vorher sagen. Apology for you, if you don't like to that we record your session, so please keep me informed that I will stop the recording and then the session is not recorded. So it depends on you as well. Okay.
It's absolutely fine for me. So
okay, that's great. Thank you. Gut, wichtige Infos. Noch einmal, die Session werden aufgenommen. Sie werden in späterer Folge auch auf YouTube gestellt. Fotos, es sei denn, Johannes, du willst heute Fotos machen, aber das ist halt ein bisschen unlustig. Normalerweise, wenn wir ein Hybrid-Event hätten, werden auch dementsprechend Fotos gemacht und die werden auf unserer Experts Live.at Homepage publiziert. Wenn das wer nicht möchte, gleiches Szenario, bitte einfach sagen. Aber ich glaube heute, Johannes, bitte korrigiere mich, aber ich glaube heute werden wir keine Fotos machen, weil es weniger Sinn macht.
Na, es gibt nur Screenshots vom Bildschirm, das bringt nichts.
Okay, passt. Okay, Ja, heute die Themen. Wir haben heute 3 Speaker, freut mich sehr. Beginnen werden wir mit Stefan. Seine Seiten, er wird sich noch selbst auch vorstellen, Senior Partner Solution Architect bei Microsoft. Dann ein Kollege von mir, der Colin, Lead, Cloud, Lead of Cloud Services, Entschuldigung, und dann ganz zum Schluss der Ballas, Lead Cloud Solution Architect at Orbit Solutions, Orbit Cloud Solutions. Alle 3 Sessions meines Erachtens noch sehr, sehr spannend, sehr interessant. Ich freue mich schon unheimlich drauf und bin schon gespannt auf die Diskussionen danach auch. Ich will aber gar nicht zu weit hineingehen in die Themen, weil jeder Speaker soll sich dementsprechend auch dann selbst vorstellen und auch die Session anpreisen. Vielleicht nur ganz wichtige Themen für 2025, 2026. Wir haben nächste Woche auch ein PowerShell-Café, das macht ein Kollege von mir und ein ganz wichtiger oder guter Speaker, auch der Tibor Soss, der halt hier wirklich in einer Live-Session auch Best Practices zum Logging oder Moduls, zum Logging-Moduls dann auch zeigt. Wird sicher auch sehr, sehr interessant und noch wichtiger, unsere Experts Live-Konferenz. Wir haben ja, wie ihr wisst, jedes Jahr die große Konferenz, in dem Fall bei uns in Linz. Und wir haben jetzt da schon wieder die Planung, mit der Planung begonnen, wird am 25. Juni 2026 sein. In Linz, wieder im Jägermeierhof. Patrick, korrigiere mich, wenn das nicht stimmt. Aber meines Wissens nach im Jägermeierhof wieder. Und ich freue mich natürlich dementsprechend auch wieder dort, Speaker zu begrüßen. Wenn einer von euch dort auch sprechen möchte oder eine Session hat, die er dort vortragen möchte, alles kein Problem. Wir werden demnächst oder bald mit Session erst beginnen. Also sprich, ihr könnt die Session jederzeit auch dort einmelden oder kommt auf mich zu. Dementsprechend, ich bin wahrscheinlich wieder für den Security Track verantwortlich und ja, freue mich halt dementsprechend wieder drauf. Ja, Community, und das ist ein wichtiger Punkt, heißt auch mitmachen. Würde mich natürlich, oder wir als Experts Live freuen uns natürlich auch immer für tatkräftige Unterstützung. Also wenn ihr Bock habt, da wirklich auch mitzutun, schreibt es mich an oder über LinkedIn connectet euch mit uns jederzeit. Wir haben immer Arbeit, wir haben immer etwas zu tun und wir freuen uns natürlich für jeden, der uns unterstützt, der vielleicht auch dort ein bisschen an Know-how einbringt in gewissen Themen, wo wir vielleicht jetzt schon ein bisschen zu wenig haben. Also alles kein Problem, jederzeit die Türen sind offen, kommt vorbei, lasst uns miteinander reden. Vielleicht können wir hier auch gemeinsam die Community verbessern. Vielleicht können wir hier auch gemeinsam die Konferenz noch verbessern, was auch immer dann auch alles. Die Türen sind dementsprechend offen. Ja, zum guter Letzt noch, damit wir es auch recorded haben, herzlichen Dank noch einmal an die fördernden Mitglieder. Wir haben grundsätzlich Mitglieder, die einmal im Jahr die Konferenz sponsern. Wir haben aber auch fördernde Mitglieder, die Offsite von der Konferenzsponsoring auch immer so unterstützen. Das ist eben die Cloud Card, die Secure Card und in dem Fall auch meine Firma oder unsere in Colin, meine Firma, die ACB IT Solutions. Danke für die Förderung quasi jedes Jahr wieder, dass wir halt eben das, was wir tun, auch tun können und dann auch dementsprechend auch ein bisschen Geld dafür haben. Wir sind jetzt kein Verein, der massig viel Geld verdient, aber wir brauchen natürlich auch ein bisschen Einnahmen, damit wir das, was wir tun, auch dementsprechend finanzieren können. Ja, das war's von meiner Seite. Relativ kurz. Ich halte mich immer sehr, sehr kurz, weil ich schon so gespannt bin auf die Sessions. Erste Session, Stefan, wenn du deinen Screen bitte sharen möchtest, du solltest das können, du bist Presenter. Ich werde jetzt mein Screen Sharing stoppen und dann bin ich schon gespannt, was du uns vorträgst mit Microsoft Defender for Cloud.
Wunderbar. Dann herzlich willkommen an alle. Stefan Barisch, Partner Solution Architect bei der Microsoft. Das heißt, ich betreue die gemanagten Partner wie die ACB zum Beispiel rund um die technischen Fragen bei Security-Lösungen von Microsoft. Ich glaube, die wichtigste Neuerung zu den letzten Sessions, die was ich immer gemacht habe, ist, seit dem heurigen Fiskaljahr sind wir für den Dachraum zuständig, also nicht mehr rein für Österreich. Das ist gerade unsere Herausforderung für das heurige Geschäftsjahr. Aber ich halte mich an das Konzept, was der Johannes eigentlich immer sagt, weniger Präsentation, mehr Praxis. Deswegen habe ich überhaupt keine Präsentation mitgenommen. Wir hätten von Microsoft natürlich für Defender for Cloud extrem viel Folien. Ich zeige es aber an die öffentlich verfügbaren Sachen und ich gehe dann direkt in unsere Demo-Umgebung nur rein, dass ihr euch das live zeigen kann. Von daher, Johannes, bitte mach das Timekeeping, falls ich ausbordend werde, weil sobald man in der Demo-Umgebung ist, konnte man Stunden drinnen verbringen. Aber
Kein
okay,
Problem.
bauen wir direkt auf. Also, was ist Defender for Cloud? Defender for Cloud ist von Microsoft die Cloud Native Application Protection Plattform, wie es da im Endeffekt schon steht, abgekürzt CNAP, und ist im Endeffekt für Multi-Cloud Security, für Security von Development-Umgebungen, als auch für Security Posture Management. Das sind im Endeffekt die drei großen Bereiche, also die Workload Protection, das ist das, was meistens jeder kennt, wenn er sich was unter einem Defender vorstellt, dass man sich im Endeffekt seine Server damit schützen kann. Das Security Posture Management, dass man im Endeffekt Empfehlungen kriegt, wie kann ich weiterhin meine Ressourcen absichern. Und die Developer Security ist alles, was rund um Deployment geht, mit den unterschiedlichen Deployment-Plattformen von GitHub, GitLab und Visual Studio, die was ich da onboarden kann und da dann auch absichern kann. Ist im Endeffekt hier das Schauspiel oder die schematische Darstellung von die drei Bereiche, und wichtig, das Ganze ist Multicloud. Und Multicloud bei Microsoft heißt immer auch mit On-Premises. Das heißt, Defender for Cloud ist auch für On-Premises gedacht. Ansonsten ist jetzt das Schwierigste zum Verstehen, wir schützen nicht nur einen Server, sondern der Server ist im Grunde nur ein kleiner Bereich davon. Die ganze Cloud Security Posture Management ist in zwei Bereichen aufgeteilt, wo der Foundational CSPM kostenlos ist. Da komme ich aber nachher dann noch im Live-System dazu. Und da bitte immer schauen, ob der auch aktiviert ist. Der Defender CSPM wäre dann die Agentless Scanning-Lösung, dass ich alle meine Ressourcen scannen kann, ohne dass ich einen Agent drauf installiere. Und dann habe ich natürlich noch einen Container-Plattformschutz, wo ich Kubernetes-Instanzen on-premises oder in Multicloud-Umgebungen schützen kann, genauso das Repository, wo ich die Container ablege. Dann ein Azure Resource Manager kann ich damit schützen, die API-Zugriffe, an Azure Key Vault, als auch Datenbanken. Und bei Datenbanken ist jetzt nicht wieder nur SQL, sondern auch Postgres und andere kann ich da direkt schützen. Auch wieder Multicloud, also egal wo sie betrieben werden. Und dann natürlich ein App-Service, also wo ich Webseiten drüber bereitstelle, als auch Storage. Und beim Storage muss ich gleich dazu sagen, das ist nur Azure. Beziehungsweise sieht man es eigentlich an der Färbung. Alles, was grün ist rein Azure. Da geht nichts anderes. Orange ist eigentlich in Azure und on-premises, beziehungsweise über Azure Arc dann auch Multicloud, und alles, was rot ist immer Multicloud-fähig. Gut, das war es einmal von alles, was jetzt da man mit dem Defender for Cloud abdecken kann. Ich würde jetzt gerne die Frage stellen, wer nutzt schon irgendwas anderes außer die Server? Dann werden meistens relativ wenige Hände hochkommen, und wann wer was sagt, dann wird es eher Datenbanken oder das Storage halt noch sein. Und das wollte ich vorher nur erwähnen, bei Storage. Das ist ein Scanner, wo man nur Malware-Scan optional dazu schalten kann. Und der scannt dann die Hash-Werte von den Files, die was gerade abgeloadet werden, so in Echtzeit, ob da über das Threat Intelligence schon mal das File als Malware verseucht irgendwie mal registriert worden ist, und ist somit eigentlich sehr schnell in der Erkennung von den Daten, ob schädlich sind oder nicht. Und man kann da dann auch einstellen, ob das auf die Datei zugegriffen werden kann, bis das Scan fertig ist, oder generell, sobald es als schädlich erkannt worden ist, gelöscht wird oder in ein Archiv oder Quarantäne verschoben wird. Gut. nachdem wir mal denken, im österreichischen Markt wird das Interessanteste für die meisten die Server sein. Alles andere ist schön. Das heißt, ich aktiviere sie im Endeffekt direkt auf der Ressource, aktiviere sie und kann es dann dementsprechend nutzen. Bei den Server schaut es ein bisschen anders aus und das Wichtigste zum Verstehen und warum heißt das ja schon auch Demystifying Defender for Cloud. Der Defender for Cloud ist jetzt nicht, wenn es um die Server geht, was dann wiederum Defender for Server heißt, ist jetzt kein eigener Agent. Den Agent werden die meisten schon kennen und der heißt im Endeffekt Defender for Endpoint. Das heißt, wir haben ein und denselben Agent auf die unterschiedlichsten Plattformen und man sieht es eigentlich hier an der Liste, der Defender for Endpoint kann Windows, macOS, Linux, Android, iOS. Wenn man Defender for Server betrachtet, ist man auf Windows und Linux beschränkt. Er könnte zwar rein technologisch auch die anderen Komponenten oder Plattformen, hat dafür aber keine speziellen Zusatzfunktionen. Weil das ist jetzt der große Unterschied und deswegen auch dieses Bild. Wenn man den Defender for Endpoint, der gibt es ja in zwei Plänen. Einmal der Plan 1, das ist hier alles, was hier so grün eingefärbt ist. Das ist alles beim Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 dabei. Und alles der ganze Rest, wo dann Threat und Vulnerability Management, Endpoint Detection und Response dazu kommt, genauso wie die Automated Investigation und Remediation und die Microsoft Threat Experts, die sind dann im Defender Endpoint Plan 2 enthalten. Jetzt ist die Frage, wie unterscheidet sich jetzt der Defender for Endpoint vom Defender for Server? Weil es gibt ja auch für den Defender for Endpoint Server-Lizenz. Die haben es leider wieder eingeführt und in dem Fall sage ich wirklich ein großes Leider, weil es einfach Verwirrung stiftet. Für alle Kunden oder Finanzler, die was gern mit strikten monatlichen Zahlen rechnen, ist die Lizenz ein Traum, weil sie genau wissen, sie haben 100 Server und zahlen dafür genau diesen Betrag und nicht mehr und nicht weniger. Beim Defender for Server ist es anders, weil der nach Stunden abgerechnet wird. Kommen wir aber nachher dann noch dazu, wie das Pricing ausschaut. Von daher, was sind jetzt die featuremäßigen Unterschiede? Weil der Defender for Server hat auch wieder zwei Pläne, und zwar den Defender for Server Plan 1 und den Defender for Server Plan 2. So, die erste Annahme, was die meisten treffen, ist mal Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 ist gleich Defender for Server Plan 1 und der Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 ist gleich der Defender for Server Plan 2. Und das ist grundsätzlich falsch, weil der Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 ist für die Server der kleinste Plan. Das heißt, Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 entspricht featuremäßig dem Defender for Server Plan 1. Ist es 100%ig feature gleich? Nein, weil beim Defender for Server Plan 1 nur mehr dabei ist, was beim Defender for Endpoint nicht dabei ist, weil es teilweise keinen Sinn macht. Und beim Defender for Server Plan 2 sind dann diese anderen ganzen Funktionalitäten mit dabei. Die gehe ich jetzt aber nicht durch, weil diese Darstellung gefällt mir nicht. Es gibt da noch eine schöne Verlinkung auf eine Tabelle, die was ich viel ansprechender finde. Und da sieht man, welche Features dann zusätzlich zum normalen Defender for Endpoint dabei sind. Und das ist im Endeffekt alles, was man jetzt daher oben sieht, die ersten drei oder eigentlich nur diese zwei Punkte, sind Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 Features. Das Multicloud und Hybrid-Support ist ein Defender for Cloud Feature. So dass ich automatisch, wenn ich jetzt irgendwo ein Azure VM, ein AWS VM, eine Google Cloud Plattform VM deploy, dass automatisch der Defender for Server deployed wird auf den Maschinen. Das ist im Endeffekt ein Feature vom Defender for Server. Dann die Integrated Alerts and Incidents. Da werden wir nachher dann auch noch sehen, ist auch wieder eigentlich ein Standard-Feature, weil im Security-Portal sehen wir dann alle Incidents in einer Übersicht. Genauso das Software-Inventory ist auch eigentlich ein Defender for Endpoint-Feature, weil das kriege ich bei meinen normalen Clients auch. Das, was ich dann nicht dabei habe, sind die regulatorischen Compliance Assessment. Das heißt, ich habe für Security Compliance Assessments mit dabei für die ISO 27001, NIS 2, DORA, die was ich direkt ausführen kann, wenn sie security relevant sind, ohne Zusatzkosten. Wegen die Zusatzkosten komme ich nachher dann noch dazu, weil da ist im Hintergrund Azure Policy und je nachdem wird es dann auch dementsprechend was kosten, wenn man auf die Geräte was verändern würde. Und Vulnerability Scanning ist auch Defender for Endpoint Feature, ist da auch direkt mit dabei. Und dann sieht man, endet der Plan 1. Aber es geht noch lange weiter für den Plan 2 und das beginnt im Endeffekt da schon mal beim Vulnerability Scanning agentless. Das heißt, ich brauche keinen Agent auf meine Maschinen, wann das im Endeffekt Echtzeit-Systemverarbeitung ist. Oder ein Betriebssystem, wo der Hersteller, der Applikationsentwickler sagt, da darf kein Virenscanner drauf. Dann kann ich im Endeffekt trotzdem Vulnerability Scanning machen auf die Ressourcen, ohne dass ich einen Defender aktiviere auf der Maschine. Macht das Sinn, weil wir haben dasselbe auch noch für die Malware Scanning. Das heißt, ich kann mir sicher sein, okay, auf dem Rechner kriege ich mit, wann was los ist, aber wenn ich nicht direkt mit einem Agent schützen kann. Läuft dann natürlich nicht in Echtzeit, sondern wird einmal am Tag wird die Maschine gescannt, ob da irgendwas dann drauf ist. Das scannt aber dann auch gleichzeitig die Secrets in der Maschine. Also wenn irgendwo ein SSH-Key abgelegt ist, Azure Token, der was auf Ressource geht. Also überall, wo Secrets im Spiel sind, kann der Agentless scannen, ob da irgendwas in einer Textdatei drinnen steht, die was man kurz sie temporär erstellt hat und dann vergessen hat zum Löschen. Es geht aber noch weiter mit Defender for DNS. Das heißt, ich kriege Alerts, wann die Maschine zum Beispiel mit einem Command-and-Control-Server spricht. Wenn das über Threat Intelligence erkannt wird, kriege ich über Defender for DNS das Alert, dass die Maschine im Endeffekt hier Suspicious Communication macht. Ich kriege aber genauso dann Threat Detection auf dem Netzwerk-Layer, wenn hier irgendwelche Aktionen gesetzt werden, die was auch nicht koscher sind. Dann sind die OS-System-Updates, die was ich da mitkriege. Das ist aber wichtig, dass man die über Azure Arc onboardet. Und bei den OS-System-Updates wird im Endeffekt der Azure Update Manager genutzt. Kommen wir nachher noch dazu, weil der ist dann über Azure Arc kostenlos in der P2 enthalten und deswegen da als Feature aufgeführt. Die Defender Vulnerability Management mit den Premium Features ist dann enthalten und natürlich dann auch der File Integrity Monitoring. Das heißt, ich kann anschauen oder verifizieren, werden die Files verändert, unabsichtlich, beabsichtigt und kann darauf mich alarmieren, falls das eine sensible Datei ist. Das, was dann cloudmäßig wieder sehr interessant ist, ich kann auch Just-in-Time Virtual Machine Access machen. Das heißt, ähnlich wie mit Azure PIM oder Entra PIM, also Privileged Identity Management, man Rollen und Berechtigungen Just-in-Time geben kann für 1-2 Stunden, kann ich hier den Zugriff auf eine Maschine, also den administrativen Zugriff, aktivieren oder deaktivieren. Das heißt, ich kann da mal den SSH-Port aufmachen, den RDP-Port oder irgendeinen anderen Port wie für die Azure, für Virtual Machine Manager oder für einen Windows Admin Manager. Kann ich mir da dann die Ports aufmachen, dass ich auf die Maschine zugreifen kann. Und rein auf Azure kriege ich die Network Map. Das heißt, mit welchen Ressourcen spricht im Endeffekt der Server, mit welchen anderen Endpoints, sodass ich im Endeffekt schöne Übersicht kriege, welche Kommunikationspfade hat dieser Server, über welche Ports und so weiter. Und ganz am Schluss so eher unscheinbar Free Data Ingestion 500 Megabyte. Die meisten können sich darunter nichts vorstellen. Damit ist aber gemeint, es sind 500 Megabyte und die 500 Megabyte sind pro Tag freie Daten zum Log Analytics Workspace gemeint. Das heißt, der Log Analytics Workspace ist die ganze Log Source oder Log Destination, wo wir alle Logs von Azure oder On-Premises oder Multicloud-Ressourcen anbinden und dann zentral abspeichern und analysieren können. Und die meisten nutzen im Endeffekt den Log Analytics automatisch, weil Azure Monitoring teilweise drüber rennt. Und für Sentinel ist das der Grundbaustein. Das heißt, Microsoft Sentinel, unser SIEM, baut immer auf einen Log Analytic Workspace drauf. Und da macht security-mäßig natürlich dann einen Riesenunterschied, ob ich 500 Megabyte kostenlose Datenquellen pro Tag habe oder nicht. Weil Sentinel wird ja Pay-per-Use nach Gigabyte Ingestion gezahlt, genauso wie der Log Analytics Workspace. Das, was jetzt da interessant ist, das Ganze geht in einen Pool. Das heißt, wenn ich jetzt 10 Server habe, die was ich mit dem Defender for Server Plan 2 betreue, habe ich im Endeffekt 5 Gigabyte Daten pro Tag kostenlos inkludiert. Und wenn ich jetzt noch 100 Server habe, die was mit dem Plan 1 ausgestattet ähm, sind die dann auch damit abdeckt, zum Teil. Weil die 100 werden wahrscheinlich ein bisschen mehr für die 5 Gigabyte machen, aber das geht in einen Pool rein und wird dann für alle Maschinen angewendet und nicht nur für die was lizenziert sind. Das ist auch wichtig zu wissen, ein ähnliches Benefit gibt es für die Microsoft 365 Lizenzierung. Da ist pro User 5 Megabyte pro Tag dabei. Und jetzt habe ich schon gesagt, Plan 1 und Plan 2 irgendwie mischen. Das war bis vor ein paar Monaten eigentlich nicht möglich. Es ist aber jetzt, und da springe ich wieder zurück, kann man den Defender for Server auf unterschiedliche Ebenen deployen. Das heißt, ich kann ihn einerseits mal komplett auf die Azure Subscription deployen. Das funktioniert für den Plan 1 und für den Plan 2. Ich kann aber den teilweise auch nur für Ressource enablen. Und das funktioniert allerdings nur beim Plan 1. Beim Plan 2 funktioniert es aber, dass ich ja dann die Ressource, den Plan für die Ressource disable. Und damit kann ich jetzt sehr interessante Deployments machen. Das heißt, ich kann, haben wir es da, den Plan, das ist, das da ist, so. Das da ist, ich kann auf die Subscription, auf die Azure Subscription, den Defender for Server Plan 2 standardmäßig aktivieren. Das heißt, jede VM, die was erstellt wird, wird dann automatisch mit dem Defender for Servers Plan 2 abgerechnet werden. Ich kann aber dann einzelne Maschinen oder mehrere Maschinen auf den Plan 2 umstellen und damit auch weniger zahlen. Das geht einerseits über API, andererseits, wenn es für mehrere ist, auch über Skript. Das war, wie gesagt, bis vor ein paar Monaten noch nicht wirklich möglich. Funktioniert jetzt so. Und weil davor war es nur immer auf Subscription-Ebene und man hat mehrere Subscriptions erstellen müssen, dass man im Endeffekt wirklich eine Mischung zwischen die zwei SKUs zusammenbringt. Gut. Die ganzen Links werde ich nachher dann noch in den Chat reingeben, beziehungsweise man findet es in unserer Dokumentation relativ leicht. So, dann schauen wir uns das Ganze kostentechnisch noch an, bevor wir live in das System reinspringen. Kostentechnisch vergleichen wir es direkt mal mit dem Defender for Endpoint. Und ja, die Microsoft-Seiten sind da relativ intransparent, weil wir sagen gleich, der Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 ist im E3 enthalten, aber wir schreiben da jetzt keine direkten Preise, genauso wie der Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 wäre in der E5 enthalten. Steht aber kein direkter Preis, es gibt es aber als einzelne SKUs und deswegen habe ich eine Partnerseite, die was in Europa die Preise transparent hat. Das ist von der Bechtle. Die haben einen Shop, wo man ohne Anmeldung reingehen kann und sich die unterschiedlichsten Produkte anschauen kann, was die kosten. Und da findet man zum Beispiel den Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 um 2,80 und Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 um 4,90. Das Wichtige, wie bei jedem Shop ist, das Ab muss man beachten. Weil wenn ich da jetzt in Plan 2 reingehe, sehe ich schon mal, sobald der geladen ist, aus 4,90 werden auf einmal 5,88. Ja, weil es gibt unterschiedliche Abrechnungen vom Defender for Endpoint, ob ich ihn jährlich Prepaid mache, ob ich ihn monatlich Postpaid mache oder aber auf 12 Monate oder wirklich pro Monat. Und wenn der Server nicht mehr da ist, dann zahle ich auch nichts mehr. Das heißt, wenn man Defender for Server oder den Defender for Cloud mit dem Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 preismäßig vergleichen will, mit derselben Lizenzierung muss man den Preis her annehmen, also die 5,88 € pro Monat. Weil, wie schon gesagt, der Defender for Server und in dem Fall der Defender for Cloud wird immer pro Stunde abgerechnet. Ich habe da jetzt die Preisseiten und da sieht man jetzt alle Produkte, was im Defender for Cloud enthalten sind, wie zum Beispiel die Foundation CSBM, den Defender CSBM, was das im Endeffekt kostet pro Stunde. Ich kann oben aber umschalten auf Monatspreise. Das heißt, wir haben jetzt gerade vorher gesehen, der Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 kostet 5,88 € und der Defender for Servers Plan 1 4,20 € oder 23. Ich glaube, da kann man mit einem Finanzler darüber reden, dass auch wenn das pro Stunde abgerechnet wird, das ist im Endeffekt der höchste Preis, was pro Monat zustande kommen kann. Wenn der Server mal für eine Stunde ausgeschaltet ist, ist die paar Cent weniger. Wenn es Februar ist, ist es auch wieder weniger. Also da hat man eigentlich immer den günstigeren Preis. Und dann sieht man Defender for Server Plan 2, wow, 12,60 € ist schon eine Ansage. Das gibt es jetzt zum Argumentieren, ob die Features, die was wir jetzt gerade vorher da gesehen haben, ob die das wert sind, dass man das extra zahlt. Meine Meinung ist, wenn es rund um Azure und also Cloud-Infrastrukturen geht, also Azure, AWS und Google Cloud-Plattform, ja, auf jeden Fall. Weil da kann ich alle Features nutzen. Wenn es um On-Premises geht, das ganze Agentless kann ich nicht nutzen. Alles, was jetzt irgendwie mit DNS und Netzwerk ist, kann ich auch nicht nutzen. Es bleibt, wenn es On-Premises geht, eigentlich nur die 500 Megabyte pro Tag. Es bleibt die File Integrity Monitoring, weil ich das über Azure Arc machen kann. Und im Endeffekt die Betriebssystem-Updates. Alles andere kann ich nicht wirklich nutzen. Da würde ich mal out of the box sagen, na, lohnt sich nicht. Es gibt aber ein Vehikel bei der Microsoft und das ist Azure Arc, worüber es sich dann wieder lohnt. Und das zeige ich im Endeffekt jetzt da, weil über Azure Arc und Azure Arc für die grundsätzlichen Funktionalitäten ist kostenlos. Das heißt, dass ich die Maschine in Azure onboarde, dass ich sehe, dass ich es grundlegend im Azure-Portal managen kann. Und wenn es Ressource ist, die was ich steuern kann, kann ich ja dann Start, Stopp und Restart-Funktionen auf die VMs machen. Wie gesagt, dazu muss es aber entweder über vCenter oder über System Center angebordet sein oder Azure Local. Aber Azure Local hat das out of the box mit drinnen. Und beim die Azure Arc Servers sieht man wieder, da hat man wieder die Defender for Servers Plan 1 und Plan 2. Und bitte die Preise, was da jetzt pro Monat angezeigt werden, nicht ernst nehmen, weil ich springe jetzt da nochmal zurück und springe nochmal auf Stunde. Es sind da die 0,6 Cent und die 1,8 Cent pro Server pro Stunde. Und es ist da dieselbe Berechnungsgrundlage, aber aus irgendeinem Grund runden diese Werte. Statt die 12,60 Euro, was sind, steht da jetzt 13 Euro. Also da würden dann die 12,60 Euro schlagend werden. Das, was jetzt da dazu kommt mit Azure Arc, könnte man dann den Azure Update Manager, der was ja im Defender for Server enthalten ist, nutzen, als auch die Azure Policy Guest Configuration und Change Tracking. Das heißt, darüber kann ich dann auch ISO 27001 Compliance auswählen, dass ich die technische Compliance meiner Server immer sicherstelle. Wenn irgendein Admin was umstellt, das brechen würde, das automatisch dann wieder umstellt auf die Compliant Settings. Und da ist jetzt dieser Satz das Interessante. Der Defender for Cloud Plan 2 hat genau diese zwei Komponenten enthalten. Und die kann ich on-premises nutzen. Das heißt, die 10,17 Euro oder 20, runde ein bisschen auf, sind da in die 13 Euro enthalten. Und das würde ich mal sagen, ist im Endeffekt dann der Kostenvorteil, den was man argumentieren kann, weil der Vesus für die Updates wird auslaufen. Das heißt, ich werde umstellen müssen auf ein System wie zum Beispiel den Azure Update Manager. Und wenn ich eine Compliance sicherstellen will, bin ich da auch gefordert, ein System zu haben, das, was man das sicherstellt. Und das kann ich mit dem Azure Policy Guest Configuration machen. Das heißt, da kann man den Preis dementsprechend auch für On-Premises rechtfertigen. Und dann würde ich sagen,
falls... Stefan, darf ich ganz kurz dazwischen Frage stellen? Aber es ist ja grundsätzlich auch so, ich kann ja den Server Plan 1 nehmen und kann die zusätzlichen Features auch for free nutzen, wenn ich eine aktive Software Assurance habe. On-Premise.
Ja.
Das ist nämlich der Satz drunter, nämlich auch ein wichtiger Punkt. Das würde natürlich auch gehen.
Genau, wenn man eine Software Assurance hat für die Server. Oder die Windows Server Lizenz über Azure bezieht, dann wäre das auch ebenfalls beinhaltet. Ja.
Das ist ja seit IGNIT 2024 so, ne? Ist das announced worden, meines Wissens nach?
Wirklich ausgeholt haben sie es, glaube ich, mit dem 2025er Server.
Aber announced ist es worden, ne?
Ja.
Genau. Okay.
Gut, dann würde ich sagen, schauen wir direkt mal ins System rein. Und das ist im Endeffekt unsere Demo-Umgebung für Security, wo im Endeffekt recht viele Ressourcen drinnen sind und man dementsprechend auch viel sieht. Und man sieht, es sind schon unterschiedlichste Ressourcen deployed. Also nochmal für alle, die was noch nicht gesehen haben, im Azure-Portal ist sehr präsent unten in der Mitte der Defender for Cloud. Also ich muss nicht suchen, ich kann direkt im Endeffekt da dann hinspringen und komme dann mal ins Dashboard, wo ich mal die wichtigsten Informationen sehe, wie schaut meine Security Posture aus, welche regulatorischen Compliance habe ich aktiviert, wie schaut da mein Wert aus, welche Controls muss ich nur mal anschauen. Genauso dann die Alerts für die Workloads, also generell vom Inventory mit wie viele Ressourcen kann ich da im Endeffekt nur verbessern. Und man sieht schon, Das ist halt ein bisschen eine größere Umgebung. Aber bevor wir jetzt da alles sich durchschauen, starten wir mal mit dem Wichtigsten und das sind die Settings. Und bei den Environment Settings sehe ich schon mal, okay, das sind jetzt alle die Cloud-Plattformen, die was wir direkt unterstützen. Das heißt, natürlich alle unsere Azure Subscriptions, aber AWS Accounts, Google Cloud Plattform. Ich kann GitHub connecten, ich kann Azure DevOps connecten, ich kann GitLab connecten, Docker und JFrog. Die kann ich connecten und siehst dann herunten, was dann welcher Plan drauf aktiviert ist. Und wenn ich jetzt da zum Beispiel bei AWS draufklicke, komme ich im Endeffekt in eine Settings, wo ich sehe, was kann ich für AWS alles aktivieren. Und da sehe ich, okay, ich kann den Foundational CSPM aktivieren, der was kostenlos ist. Ich kann den Defender CSPM aktivieren, der wird die $5 pro Ressource pro Monat kosten. Und natürlich die Workload Protection, wo ich da Server, Datenbanken und Container unterstütze. Der Preis ist eigentlich dann immer dasselbe, wie wenn man es auf Azure deployt. Man sieht da, ich kann dann nur die Security Policy machen und die Environment Details, aber das schauen wir uns bei einer Azure-Plattform an. Da haben wir dann mehr Settings. Und dasselbe auch bei den anderen Plattformen. Also da habe ich die unterschiedlichsten Plattformen, die was ich da onboarden kann und da dann direkt drinnen sehe. Und man sieht da bei Azure, ist noch nicht alles sich aufgeklappt. Da kann man noch, je nachdem, ob man Management Groups hat, das im Endeffekt aufklappen und sieht dann unterschiedlichste Ressourcen. Wie zum Beispiel einmal die Azure Subscription, als auch die Log Analytic Workspaces. Und wenn man auf die Azure Subscription drauf geht, sehe ich, okay, da habe ich jetzt alle meine Settings wie vorher bei AWS, nur halt alle Features, die was im Endeffekt der Defender for Cloud hat. Mit Server, mit den App-Service, Datenbanken, Storage und so weiter. Und wie vorher bei AWS kann ich da auch die Pläne ändern. Ich sehe das dann, auf welcher Plan dann standardmäßig gestellt ist, kann ich direkt eigentlich hier ändern auf Subscription-Ebene, das heißt für alle Ressourcen. Ich kann aber direkte Settings auch machen, was jetzt den Client nur betrifft. Das heißt, ob es über einen Log Analytic Agent gehen soll, ob ich ein Volatility Assessment drüber machen will, ob ich die Gas Configuration aktivieren will, genauso wie standardmäßig die Endpoint Protection oder das Agentless Scanning, was ich vorher gesagt habe, genauso wie die File Integrity. Das kann ich da dann nur mal dezidiert aktivieren oder deaktivieren, je nachdem, ob ich das in meiner Umgebung haben will oder nicht. Gibt es dann für unterschiedliche Datenbanken ähnliche Settings, ob ich es aktivieren will oder nicht. Gilt, wie gesagt, auf die unterschiedlichsten Ressourcen, also SQL Server, Postgres, unterstützen wir da eigentlich alles sich. Da haben wir es also Open Source Rationale, die Cosmos DB und die SQL Server auf VMs, als auch die SQL Datenbanken auf Azure. Und bei den SQL Server auf VMs nur ein wichtiges, es gibt da die Unterscheidung beim Pricing, ob man die Server in Azure hat oder Server außerhalb von Azure. Und ich bin gerade ein bisschen verwirrt, muss ich jetzt gerade ehrlich sagen, weil mir fällt das da. Für alle SQL-Server, die was außerhalb von Azure sind und nicht Azure Arc enabled, kostet das die 1,3 Cent pro Instanz pro V-Core pro Stunde gegenüber die 1,8 Cent pro Instanz pro Stunde. Das heißt, bei einer 10-Core-Maschine könnt ihr euch ausrechnen, dass das natürlich dann schon 13 Cent kostet pro Stunde für die eine Instanz und nicht 1,8 Cent. Von daher da gerade ein bisschen aufpassen, weil das ist mir jetzt gerade aufgefallen, dass das aktuell dann nicht korrekt ist. Gut, gehen wir weiter. da bitte, wenn ihr bei euch reinschaut, schaut, ob die Foundational CSPM aktiviert ist. Weil nur damit kriegt ihr zum Beispiel den Secure Score, wo ihr seht, wie steht ihr aktuell mit eurer Sicherheit in der Umgebung. Und es gibt ein paar Instanzen, weil der nachträglich aktiviert worden ist mal, wo der noch aufsteht. Von daher bitte bei alle euren Instanzen auf jeden Fall schauen, dass der Foundational CSPM eingeschaltet ist. Und dann wird wahrscheinlich sicher die Frage sein, was ist eigentlich der Defender CSPM? Und wenn man da reinschaut auf die Funktionalitäten, was er hat, da sind im Endeffekt die ganzen Agentless-Sachen bereits mit drinnen. Das heißt, wenn ich jetzt irgendeine Ressource habe, wie ich vorher gesagt habe, beim Defender for Server, wo kein Agent drauf darf, oder weil es einfach hochskaliert und schnell wieder weg ist, da brauche ich keinen Agent drauf, sondern kann Agentless darüber das Ganze buchen. Wird dann im Endeffekt $5 pro Monat kosten für die Ressource und nicht $15 für den Plan 2. Also wäre je nachdem definitiv eine interessante Option. Da kann ich auch wieder dann unterschiedliche Settings machen, was ich jetzt dann für die unterschiedlichsten Ressourcen aktivieren will, dass ich im Endeffekt Permission Management überziehen lasse, dass ich Registry Access analysiere, wann da auf ein Container Registry Zugriff ist. Also da kriege ich schon sehr viele Informationen raus. Das nächste sind dann die Security Policies, wie ich vorher schon gesagt habe, dass man im Endeffekt ISO 27001, NIST 2 und andere Compliance-Richtlinien aktivieren kann. Und da ist immer der Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, der ist immer standardmäßig und kostenlos dabei. Alle anderen erst im Endeffekt, wenn man den Defender for Server hat, kann man den im Endeffekt haben. Und da ist auch der EU AI Act mit drinnen, als auch die NIS 2. Das heißt, da kann ich gleich mal für meine Ressourcen die technische Compliance sicherstellen, indem ich direkt ein Audit und direkt ein Audit, also im Fall eines Audits auf Knopfdruck im Endeffekt sehe, wie schaut meine aktuelle Umgebung aus, ist irgendwo was auffällig. Ich kann da natürlich dann auch Alerts setzen, ab wann kriege ich im Endeffekt Alerts, wobei ich würde das nicht hierüber machen, sondern das zeige ich dann nachher noch, dann über das normale Defender-Portal, über security.microsoft.com. Ich kann da dann noch die Workflow Automation machen, das heißt, dass Automatisierung über die Logic Apps, also eine SOAR-Komponente ausgeführt wird, wann ein gewisser Alert kommt. Genauso kann ich dann die ganzen Alerts und Events dementsprechend exportieren, falls ich das in ein anderes System brauche, in ein externes Team oder was auch immer. Kann ich im Endeffekt alles konfigurieren, wenn es auf ein Event-Hub geht oder eine andere SIEM-Integration. Und natürlich, welche Daten will ich da im Endeffekt exportieren. Aber normalerweise liegt der sowieso immer alles sich auf dem Log Analytic Workspace. Der ist standardmäßig mit drin. Gut, das waren im Endeffekt mal die Settings und dann schauen wir uns nochmal das Portal an. Beziehungsweise, wir gehen nochmal zurück auf die Settings, weil wir haben da noch...
Kurzer Timebreak, 9 Minuten noch.
9 Minuten, passt. Wir haben da noch so einen schönen Button für Direct Onboarding. Und das ist im Endeffekt das Wichtigste, das aktivieren und jede Subscription, die was darunter ausgewählt ist, wird automatisch jede Ressource, die was erstellt wird, wenn es jetzt ein VM ist, den Defender Agent aktivieren. Das ist dann wirklich Admin-Proof. Das kann man nicht mehr vergessen. Es wird automatisch gemacht. Für alle, die was den Defender for Cloud schon länger benutzen, Gibt es auch noch eine wichtige Sache. Es ist ja vom Log Analytic Agent wegmigriert worden auf den Monitor Agent. Und da gibt es noch einen eigenen Button, wie man im Endeffekt die Migration macht. Aber eigentlich, nachdem es im August 24 war, müssten schon alle migriert sein, weil ansonsten würden die Systeme stehen. Und ich hoffe, das wird man mitkriegen. Gut, eine wichtige Sache noch. Jetzt habt ihr da vorher gesehen, dass da die Log Analytic Workspace drinnen sind. Und auch auf die Log Analytic Workspaces kann man Defender for Cloud aktivieren. Und zwar die Foundational CSPM als auch den Defender for Server. Und jetzt wird Sie euch fragen, Defender for Server auf einen Log Collector macht irgendwie keinen Sinn. Ja, schon. Weil ich kann damit im Endeffekt meine Server so einstellen, dass alle Server alle Logs auf diese Log Analytic Workspace hin deployen und aktiviere dann darauf den Defender for Cloud und analysiere im Endeffekt, ob in den Logs irgendwas vorkommt, was auf ein Malware oder irgendwas anderes schließen lässt. Und das wird auch mit den $15 pro Server pro Monat, also mit dem Plan 2, abgerechnet. Und da noch großer Hinweis. Es wird jede VM-Ressource oder jede Compute-Ressource, die was dann hochreportet, mit diesem Preis bepreist pro Monat. Das heißt, wenn eure Clients da hochreporten, zahlt ihr für jeden Client nochmal die $15. Von daher dieses Setting bitte mit Bedacht wählen. Gut, ansonsten nur kurz überblicksmäßig. Unter Recommendation kriegt man im Endeffekt die Empfehlungen des Cloud Security Posture Management. Welche Empfehlungen sollte ich machen, dass ich im Endeffekt wieder eine sichere Umgebung kriege? Die sind so aufgebaut, dass ich da immer Beschreibung kriege, auch eine Empfehlung, wo ich eine Aktionen sollte ich setzen, was im Endeffekt gefunden worden ist und ob es irgendeinen Attackpfad gibt, wie jetzt mit bekannten Vulnerabilities oder mit die Ressourcen ein Angreifer auf dann eine sensible Ressource kommt. Und in dem Fall mit dieser, mit dem Vulnerability, was der Server aktuell hat, konnte er über die IP-Adresse auf den Server gelangen und von da über die Managed Identity, weil der Server da Zugriff hat, auf den Key Vault zugreifen und da dann die Keys auslesen. Was natürlich definitiv nicht gewünscht ist. Das heißt, da kriege ich schon mal die Informationen, wie ich mich proaktiv besser schützen kann. Bei der Attackpfadanalyse sind dann alle Ressourcen dementsprechend mit den Attackpfade drinnen und unter Security Alerts sehe ich dann, welche Alerts aktuell aktiv sind. Ich würde aber nicht dieses System nutzen. Da wechseln wir nachher dann ein kleines ins Security-Portal. Alles andere ist halt dann wirklich speziell auf dem hingezogen, wenn ich jetzt zum Beispiel das Security Posture Management mache mit meinem Secure Score. Da habe ich da im Endeffekt alles drinnen, kann nach den unterschiedlichen Plattformen filtern. Ich kann mir die ganze als Berichte ausschauen. Wenn ich auf Compliance aus bin, habe ich da meine ganzen Informationen. Ich sehe, welche Assets sind im Endeffekt erfüllt, welche nicht, welche Ressourcen sind, erfüllen das nicht und kann da im Endeffekt alles abarbeiten. Genauso, wenn ich da eine Workload Protection mache, sehe ich im Endeffekt alle meine Ressourcen hier dargestellt, genauso wie Data und AI. Weil das habe ich vergessen, es gibt mittlerweile auch eine AI-Komponente, dass man AIs damit schützen kann. Viel interessanter ist dann im Endeffekt im Defender-Portal. Das heißt, das ist das, was normalerweise alle Security Engineers oder alle primär arbeiten, weil hier habe ich wirklich alle Ressourcen, was Microsoft Security betreffen, eigentlich hier herinnen. Ich habe das Security Exposure Management mit dem Secure Score da herinnen. Ich habe meine Assets, also meine Devices drinnen. Und zwar egal, ob es jetzt ein Desktop oder ein Server ist, die sind da im Endeffekt auch alle mit drinnen. Genauso, ob es ein Netzwerkgerät, ein IT-Gerät ist. Die habe ich alle hier herinnen und ich habe eine Incident-Übersicht über alle meine Ressourcen. Und das ist, glaube ich, das Einfachste dann zum Arbeiten, nicht irgendwie silomäßig auf Clients schauen oder auf Server, sondern alles ganzheitlich betrachten, wie bei dem kleinen Fall, wo ein bisschen über 2000 Accounts betroffen sind. Und wenn man halt reinschaut, sieht man halt alle Assets, man sieht Incident Graph, wo alle Ressourcen dann miteinander verbunden sind. Falls man einen Defender for einen Security Copilot nutzt, kriegt man da auf der Seite gleich die Zusammenfassung dargestellt mit den nächsten Empfehlungen der Schritte, die was unternommen werden sollen und so weiter. Und ja, ich glaube, das ist einer der größten Graphen, die was ich bis jetzt gesehen habe. Und ja, ich hoffe, es hat es verständlicher gemacht, dass der Defender for Server oder der Defender for Cloud jetzt kein abstruses Konstrukt ist, sondern wirklich Produkt ist, was man dezidiert dann überall einsetzen kann, wo man im Endeffekt das Serverbetriebssystem hat, auch für Linux natürlich und da natürlich den bestmöglichsten Schutz eigentlich kriegt. Ja, falls es keine Fragen gibt, würde ich dann an den Colin übergeben.
Ja, super. Vielen Dank, Stefan. Colin, du bist noch gemutet. Man
Ja.
hört dich nicht. Ja, coole Session. Kurz an die Runde gefragt, gibt es noch Fragen dazu? Ich hätte an und für sich auch in Q&A hineingeschrieben, aber wenn es jetzt noch Fragen geben sollte, jederzeit natürlich. Und vielleicht noch vorab gleich, Colin, ist es für dich okay, wenn man dich unterbricht bei der Session oder soll man ein Q&A?
Ja, sicher, einfach unterbrechen.
Passt. Aber nochmal zurück, gibt es Fragen an Herrn Stefan? Rund um Microsoft Defender for Cloud, was persönlich von mir eines der Lieblingsprodukte ist.
Also ich hätte noch eine Frage zur Lizenzierung. Es gibt ja verschiedene Lizenzpläne, die Microsoft hat. Sind die P1 und P2 Lizenzen nicht in den jeweiligen Enterprise-Lizenzen von M365 nicht ohnehin inbegriffen? Also es gibt ja die E3, da ist, glaube ich, das
Nur-
P1 drinnen und
Entschuldigung.
das P2 ist in der M5 Enterprise drin, oder?
Aber
Und
nur
auch-
der,
Die Add-ons gibt es ja auch noch, oder es gibt ja auch noch theoretisch das Security Add-on E5 für die E3.
aber nur für einen Defender for Endpoint. Der Defender
Okay.
for Cloud ist Pay-per-Use über Azure Subscription.
Okay, also der braucht die Azure Subscription plus Pay-per-Use. Okay. Das heißt,
Genau,
die Pläne dort sind sowieso grundsätzlich völlig unabhängig von der Usage
korrekt.
der anderen Lizenzen.
Also-
Okay.
Die Defender for Endpoint ist in den Microsoft 365 Pläne enthalten. Das sieht man da, ist aufgeführt. Und Defender for Cloud ist rein Pay-per-Use, aber ich hoffe, ich habe es richtig dargestellt. Der Monatspreis ist definitiv günstiger, wie wenn man es über Defender for Endpoint, weil da gibt es ja auch eine Serverkomponente, lizenzieren wird. Von daher würde ich featuremäßig immer Defender for Servers empfehlen und nicht Defender for Endpoint. Aber wenn es für den Einkauf interessanter ist, weil es ein fixer monatlicher Betrag ist.
Das heißt, es ist immer dann spannend, wenn man halt eigentlich in Verhandlungen geht mit Microsoft bezüglich der Lizenzen. Aber ich denke, bezüglich der Preise wird es ja wahrscheinlich keine Schwankungen oder keine Verhandlungsspielräume geben. Das sind einfach die Fixpreise pro
Genau.
Monat und die nutzt man halt dann entsprechend.
Genau, das ist das primäre Problem. Also bei Asia-Preise, die sind im Endeffekt fix, werden monatlich an den Dollarkurs angepasst. Bei den Volumenlizenzen, also Defender for Endpoint mit den Microsoft 365 Lizenzen, da kann man natürlich, wenn man auf 3 Jahre das Ganze macht oder über ein Enterprise Agreement andere Konditionen herausholen. Die Möglichkeit hat man bei Azure in dem Fall nicht. Da gibt es im Endeffekt nur eine Möglichkeit und das war der Azure Commitment, dass ich im Endeffekt sage, okay, ich commit mich jetzt als Firma, dass ich in den nächsten 2 Jahren 8 Millionen Azure Umsatz mache. Aber dafür, also die großen Firmen in Österreich machen das, die kleinen sind für Microsoft zu klein.
Gut, ja, danke für die Antwort. Das beantwortet jetzt einmal jetzt für mich. Das ist
Ja.
wichtig, dass man nicht in die fälschliche Situation kommt, zu glauben, man kann dann praktisch über die Basislizenz von M365 auch die Ressource beziehen. Ich hätte jetzt schon gedacht, es hätte mich gewundert, warum das dann auf der einen Seite da pro Monat so spezifisch abgerechnet wird, praktisch pro Server und dann die anderen Lizenzen praktisch
Pro User.
pro User halt natürlich dann abgerechnet sind, ja. Das ist schon ein Unterschied, ja. Aber das macht natürlich völlig Sinn, gell, weil du natürlich ganz andere Bedürfnisse hast für einen Server und ganz andere Stückzahl von Servern halt meistens betreibst halt als User hast in einem Unternehmen, ja.
Genau.
Soll natürlich auch umgekehrte Fälle geben, wo man weniger User als Server hat. Also das ist dann auch spannend, gell. Gut, danke auf jeden Fall, gell.
Bitte gerne.
Gut, ja, Colin. The stage is
Super.
yours.
Alles klar, danke. Ich würde, wenn es für alle okay ist, da wir englische Teilnehmer haben, würde ich die Präsentation auf Englisch, in englischer Sprache machen. Ist das für alle okay oder wollt ihr es lieber auf Deutsch? Wenn nicht, dann würde ich es auf Englisch machen.
Englisch
Ja.
ist völlig okay.
Ja, super. Dann versuche ich, I will try to share my screen. Give me a second. Let's share this presentation. I hope you can see the presentation. Good work. Perfect. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. So I prepared this topic like Azure cost control, so tools, techniques, optimization. And yeah, during this preparation, I also realized this is a huge topic and I cannot pack everything into this like 45 minutes. But I try to cover some of the topics which might be interesting for you. And I hope you also gain some benefit from my presentation where I show you some techniques, tools, optimization possibilities for Azure Cloud Cost Control. And I will also try to sometimes switch over to the Azure portal to show you some hands-on experiences there. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, my name is Colin Jochum. I'm from Graz, Austria. I'm at ACP IT Solutions like Johannes. I'm the lead of cloud services in Graz and cloud solution architect. I also published here some web links where you can visit me. Feel free to engage me. Feel free to write me. I'm happy to engage with you. So let's take a quick look at the agenda. So first, we will just cover a little bit of the fundamentals and maybe show some cost visibility options we have in Azure. Then we dive into cost optimization. So how can we improve our costs in Azure? Then I have prepared some common pitfalls and recommendations. So this is from a daily experience which I have with customers, and I tried to summarize it a little bit there. And last but not least, we talk about some tools which can be used for cloud costs and which are helpful in these situations. I first start with this slide. So this slide's pretty much shows some of the experiences I have with customers from time to time. So if you read a little bit through it, it highlights some of the problems, some of the challenges we have with Azure cloud costs. There's quite a few challenges. Those are just some of the questions I get and some of the situations we get in when we talk about Azure cloud cost control. So it's kind of a tricky topic, a big topic, and especially also a complex topic. As you might know, Microsoft pricing is sometimes very complex. And here, Azure Cloud Cost Fundamentals. So I try to break it up really easy. We will see this formula down here again later on. So basically, cloud costs, the spending, what you actually spend in the clouds, is calculated based on usage and rate. So the usage is how much you use of it, so how long you use of it, how much space you use of it. And the other thing is the rate. So the rate is defined by Microsoft. For example, a virtual machine costs a certain amount of euros per hour. In Azure, we have different pricing models. One of the most common, which you might know, is the pay-as-you-go model. So you pay, it's a subscription-based model. It's also in the operation and expenses cost model. So you have no upfront investment, so you just pay per use. So if you shut down, for example, a virtual machine, you don't pay for it. If you start it again, you pay for it. That's pretty much the essentials of it. Let's talk a little bit about cloud cost visibility, because visibility is very important. If you want to manage your cloud costs, you need visibility in the cloud. That's for sure. So with visibility, the Azure resource hierarchy is very important. So you can see here there's a hierarchy in Azure. It starts with management groups, then it goes down to subscription resource groups. And on all those hierarchies, you can see costs, manage costs, you can adjust things. So that's why it's important to understand that there's a hierarchy in place in Azure. For example, what you can see here is this vertical cost allocation. So if I want to check my costs, let's say for all of my identity services, which then have the domain controllers in it, for example, I could check that on the identity subscription, or I could even check it higher up, like it's visualized here in this identity management group. In this identity management group, there might be multiple resources and so on, but it's a vertical cost allocation. Then there's also horizontal cost allocation. So this is important if I want to view my costs on a horizontal scale. So here tagging comes into play. So you can see in the example down there, for example, I have 4 subscriptions down there and they're all tagged with a cost center. And as you can see, 2 of them have the global IT tag for the cost center. One has the business unit A, one the business unit B. And a manager comes to me, let's say, for example, from a company and says, please deliver me all the costs for the global IT. So I need this horizontal cost information. And I could do this now with the tags, because I just say to the Azure portal, I will show you on the next slide, I think it is, that please deliver me all the costs with this tag global IT. So these are 2 fundamentals when we talk about cost visibility. And how can we actually see the costs in the Azure portal? This is through this Azure cost management. You can find this on multiple places in Azure. It's on subscription levels, resource group levels, also on a billing hierarchy. You can also find this, or in this general Azure cost management control. And what you can see here in the screenshot, I just screenshotted this from my test environment. You can see here, you get a basic information from the cloud costs. The thing is, what you can do here is you can even filter that. I highlighted it with a red arrow here. So you can apply a filter, and here you could say, okay, only show me the costs for those specific tags which I mentioned. So you have this horizontal cost explanation and data. There's additional filters. For example, you could say, just deliver me the cost for the region West Europe, which I did here, and EU North. And you can also adjust timelines and so on and so on. You can dive really deep into this cost management. So this is one of the first great tools which I wanted to show you. Azure Cost Management, definitely a good point. What is also very important is this cost budget and alerting. So cost budget and alerting, I see a lot of customers not setting this up properly or not setting it up at all. The thing is, if you forget to, if you are not aware of cloud resource costs, it could happen that you get a big bill at the end of the month and you're shocked and surprised. With this budget and alerting, you can prevent that a little bit because it will alert you if you reach a certain threshold on a budget or a forecast is a certain threshold. I can actually show you this if I switch out of my presentation. For example, I have here my test environment subscription, and yeah, I reached actually my budget for this month already. So you can see here, I set my budget for 145 euros, and it is forecasted actually 200 euros, and actually spent was 160 euros. So I reached my budget, and I set up this budget here. And last week, I actually received a notification via email that my budget will be reached. So the forecast was already at 200 euros. So it told me an information, okay, you will reach your budget, please be careful. You can also see the cost alerting here in the subscription if it takes a bit of time to load, but you can see here that the budget exceeded the threshold, which I set, yeah. And it's very easy actually in the Azure portal here, you can just add up here a new budget. You can specify unique name, specify a threshold, let's say 200 here. You can see it also visualized here. So it's pretty easy, but a lot of customers just forget about this. And my recommendation for this is also to integrate this budget, setting this budget when you deploy subscription. When you deploy subscription, just set a budget. So think about how much will my costs be and set this budget. It's a so-called subscription vending process. So deploying a subscription in Azure should include this setting a budget out of the default. Next up, I have this cloud cost optimization topic. I divided this in 3 subtopics. So cloud cost optimization, the first thing which we could do is reduce this rate. If you remember this formula, we could reduce this the second part in the formula, so the rate. How can we reduce that? Well, pay as you go is nice and good, but it's actually the most expensive rate, I would say. So we're trying to reduce this rate, this pay as you go rate, as much as possible to save some cloud costs. How can we do that? One of the possibilities is Azure reservations. Azure reservations, you can actually reduce your rate by 72% if you compare to pay as you go. Reservations is nice. It can be applied to virtual machines, blob storage, so to multiple different services. The thing though, or the big catch with reservations is you apply this reservation for a specific configuration. So for 1 or 3 years. So you're committing to a specific configuration for 1 or 3 years to Microsoft, and they grant you a reduction in the rate, basically. So reservations are not ideal for fluctuating workloads or for dynamic workloads. Let's say your virtual machine has 2 vCPUs and suddenly you realize, oh, that performance is not enough, I need more. With reservations, you cannot just change that. You are committing to a specific configuration. Then there is savings plan. It gives you a little bit less of this rate reduction compared to the reservation, but it has a big benefit here. You're committing basically to a fixed hourly spending for the next 1 or 3 years. So not to a fixed configuration, but to a fixed hourly spending. And that is why here you are more dynamic. For example, you could change your service SKUs, your configurations. It doesn't really matter because you're just committing to a fixed hourly spending. And that's why Microsoft is giving you a discount on that. As you can see, 65%, it's a little bit lower, but I actually prefer the savings plans most of the times over the reservations. But it heavily depends on what kind of workloads you're deploying. And like I also mentioned here in the slides, it covers also additional services and resources like Azure Functions, web apps. Yeah. Hybrid benefit. This is for virtual machines, or especially so for Azure virtual machines with Windows Server or SQL Server on it. Here you can save a lot on licensing costs. I recently had a customer where we did this, and yeah, it was a big licensing cost savement for him, or cloud spending save, because he can save up to 85% with this. And you can combine hybrid benefit with this savings plan or reservation. You can combine those. The big requirement here is that you need Microsoft Software Assurance. Only then you can save those licensing costs for Azure VMs with Windows Server, let's say. I also made a screenshot. It is pretty easy to enable. Yeah. I also, during the preparation for this talk, I basically compared all those options. So at the top, you can see I compared this option with a D1680S V6 virtual machine. So it's a 16 vCPU machine with 64 gigabytes of RAM. So it's quite a big machine. And I deployed it in Austria East, or I calculated it for Austria East region, which is the new Microsoft region in Austria. And yeah, pay as you go, you can see you pay around 1,160 euros. So it's quite expensive. It's quite an expensive machine. And then I started to gradually apply one of those savings and combining them. And as you can see, for example, this reserved instances, which is RI here in this diagram, for 3 years, you're already down to 727 euros. So that's already a big improvement. But if I applied everything to the maximum, so reserved instances and Azure Hybrid Benefit, you can see a 77% price reduction. So instead of over 1,000 euros, I would pay 264 euros per month. So it's a big price reduction. Many customers are not aware of that, cost-saving options. They just deploy the virtual machines and keep them running, deploy them, or their services doesn't have to be virtual machines. And yeah, they realize the cloud is very expensive. Yes, of course it is expensive if you are not planning and are aware of those options. So yeah, as you can see, big improvements possible there. I also included this one here. It's Azure Virtual Machine Spot instances. I can recommend them, but only in some use cases. You can see you get a very big discount, 90%. So you can deploy a very big VM for very little price. The big drawback here is this virtual machine is not guaranteed for you to be up and running all the time. Microsoft can basically take it away in like 30 seconds from you. So I would only recommend this for testing, for batch jobs, CI/CD pipelines, or stateless applications where it doesn't matter if your data is gone. But yeah, you could deploy very big VMs at a very reduced pricing here. Additional cost-saving options. There's also additional ones, which I don't want to go too deep into details, but as you can see, Microsoft also offers some dev and test subscriptions where, for example, you pay no operating system license costs. Also Visual Studio subscriptions, which you saw previously in my Azure portal environment here, where you get a certain amount of credits if you have a Visual Studio enterprise license, for example. So this could also be very helpful for your environments if you have enterprise Visual Studio. Just use those Visual Studio subscriptions for testing purposes. It's important. Those are just for testing purposes, never for production. And then I think Stefan Barisch also mentioned that it's the Microsoft Azure consumption commitment. Yeah, this is for those big companies, which Stefan mentioned. Where you go into a contract with Microsoft and you get certain discounts in Azure. Yeah. Let's move over to this next subtopic. It's this usage optimization. Yeah, so the usage optimization is also in the formula, the first part. How can we optimize this usage? There is a lot of things what we can do. It also heavily depends on the service in Azure. That's why I try to pick out some things, but it's such a big topic. Well, the overall goal is reduce the overall usage to reduce the costs. One big thing I see with customers, they don't clean up their Azure cloud environments. So they have a lot of Azure resources just lying around, and they're sometimes doing nothing, and they're just producing costs. This is also this second point which I wrote there, is this orphaned cloud resources. Orphaned cloud resources are not attached. They have no purpose at this point in time, at least. And yeah, they're just producing costs. They're just lying around there. So I will show you later on a quick trick, or not a trick, it's a workbook from Microsoft, which they recently released, where you can detect those orphaned resources. Then usage optimization, another key is monitoring. So if you don't monitor your resources, you don't know if you can optimize them. Let's say a virtual machine, which only uses 2% of its CPU cores all the time. It's just idling, basically. You could scale that down and optimize your usage, let's say, for that. Or I brought this example here in my slides with Azure SQL. You could use these elastic pools. So for example, you have a company which has some peaks on those different databases. You could deploy them all on individual database servers, or you could use elastic pools, where you can basically save costs by putting multiple databases in this elastic pool. And what is also important is the second point, is this resize your cloud resources regularly. So monitor them and then resource. It's an ongoing process. It's not a one-time thing, which you should do. So yeah, try to optimize regularly on this. What I also put in here for optimization is use automation. It's a very practical example. For example, for virtual machines, sometimes you have Azure virtual machines where you say, okay, the customer leaves at the end of in the evening and starts again in the early morning. You could save costs by shutting them down in the night, for example. For on-premises system, you wouldn't care. 24/7, keep the system running. We don't care really that much, maybe from a resource perspective, but not from a cost perspective. In the cloud, you should definitely care. So what you could do is that you automatically shut down those virtual machines. That's already implemented in the portal. The issue is you cannot start those machines again. However, with, let's say, an automation account, you could do that. You could automate this, that the machine is automatically stopped and then start again. And I actually can also show you, because if I open this here, let's quickly check.
I'm sorry, Colin, can I
sure.
add here two ideas from my side about how can you reduce cost in case of automation. So what also is possible, so think about reserved instances. You're using reserved instances. You have a VM, for example, a D2 V5 or DS2 V5, whatever, and you need this VM. So when we think about a developer perspective, you have a daily and your nightly sprint. For example, exactly what mentioned by Colin. So you're shutting down the VM. So you have your daily sprint from 8 o'clock to 7 p.m. and you're using this VM exactly in this time frame. Then you stop the VM, and 1 minute later, you start the nightly sprint VM from 7 o'clock to 8 a.m., for example, and you can use the same reservation for those two VMs. It's possible because the reservation is not assigned to a specific VM, it's assigned to a VM type, and this is also a possibility what you can do to reduce the cost. And the second thing is to stop resources. Normally we are talking about stopping resources in case of infrastructure service. Does anyone of you know that you can also stop the Azure firewall? It's possible. You can stop the Azure firewall and no additional costs. So normally it's not really practical, but in case of reduced cost, it's also possible for some PaaS services to stop the Azure firewall and reduce the cost in this case. So I'm sorry, this is the two insights from my side in case of
no problem.
Cost.
That's actually a good input. Yeah, That's actually good input. Also on the application gateway, you can also stop that and save costs. Yeah, it's the same. But yeah, what I wanted to show here just quickly is with these runbooks, you don't even have to write those runbooks yourself. In the day of Copilot, it's very easy actually. But there's also a gallery here up here, which I wanted to show. And if we go into this gallery and say we want to see what Microsoft published here, we can see those runbooks basically here pre-configured. So you could use those. And those are, for example, to start your Azure VMs again, and so on and so on. You can modify those and use those. So that's pretty convenient. If we now jump to the last architecture decision, cost optimization topic. So here, I want to emphasize that cost optimization actually already starts very early. Actually, in the architecture phase, it is very important that you think about cost optimization. For example, I highlighted in red here, this right sizing cloud resources. Sometimes people just don't think about that. They just deploy it like on-premise. You don't care too much what sizes you use, but in the cloud, you should care. And that's why in the architecture design phase, you should already think about how much performance, how much sizing do I really need. Maybe I don't need the highest powered VM. Maybe I don't need the best virtual machine or disk or storage. So yeah, there's a lot of thinking going on there, or design thinking, I would say. What is also important is what people are sometimes not aware, or companies are not aware, that there's regional cost differences. If we, for example, jump in this slider, you can see that there's actually a big difference between regions. In multiple data center regions, as you can see here, and yeah, it's basically over double the costs in some cases. So yeah, also think that through when designing your architecture, maybe when already building up your cloud infrastructure or your cloud tenant, think about what is maybe the regional difference in costs. So that's also important. And then also think about using PaaS over infrastructure as a service. So that could also be some cost benefits over there. I especially think about SQL Server, for example. Maybe try to think about putting it on a PaaS service to save cost. I also put this in here, storage cost optimization. Storage is always a big topic in the cloud. I see a lot of customers not using the storage lifecycle management and also those storage tiers. As you can see, I calculated it for a simple Gen 2 storage in, I think, Germany, West Central, I calculated it. So the hot storage costs $200, and then you can move the data to different tiers. For example, cold would only cost you $46. Archive is a little bit of a different tier, but it would only cost you, a fraction of that $200. So think about implementing this storage cost optimization. Also think about reducing your storage data footprint. Maybe you have data which you actually don't need, and maybe you can use compression or some algorithms to reduce that footprint, the data footprint. So that was just an example where I put a closer look on storage optimization. Also, I used this example here where I took a look at the disks, so managed disks. These are, for example, for virtual machines. As you can see, right now the premium SSD V2, which are quite new and recently released, I would say, they are your performance king, I call them here. But they offer big performance, big flexibility, because you can adjust the capacity, the IOPS throughput individually. You cannot do that on the other ones, on the V1 or the standard SSD. And as you can see, I calculated it here. They offer a very good price. So there are some drawbacks still with V2 premium SSDs. You cannot use them for OS disks, and there's some other limitations. But if those limitations are not a problem for you, you should definitely use those. Be careful also with standard SSDs. This is the part where I said sometimes Microsoft pricing is also a little bit tricky, because standard SSDs are cheaper. That's true. and that's also good. But you are charged for storage transactions on standard SSDs. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you have a lot of storage transactions, for example, databases, you might get in a situation where the standard SSD is actually more expensive than a premium SSD. It's some edge cases, but it could happen. Then last but not least, I have prepared some, let's say, common pitfalls and recommendations. These are just some things I see on a daily basis with customers. And I just wanted to show you some of them. And maybe there's something helpful for you as well in there. So the first point, which are very common, I already mentioned, is this budget alerting, which is very often not configured or not in place. Then often there's no cost monitoring in place, like this alerting, and also this, you can also export your costs in Power BI, for example. There's no monitoring, and no visualization there. What I also often see is this over provisioning or orphaned resources, which I talked about. And then these systems which are 24/7 running. And also very common is that PaaS services are not even considered. So sometimes customers just say, let's put everything on virtual machines. They often don't even think about that there's a PaaS service which might be cheaper, might be more performant, more resilient, scalable. So what I also often see is unexpected charges. So sometimes the customer really sees his bill and thinks like, where do these costs come from suddenly? Let's say, for example, unexpected charges, which are very common, is this data egress charges. Many customers don't know that you pay actually right now for if data is leaving the Azure data center. So if the data is leaving, you pay for that. You also pay a little bit of cost for VNet peering data transfers, Azure private link data transfers. So that's some unexpected charges. What I also see quite commonly is that a customer approaches me or ACP, and they say, well, I turned down my virtual machine, but I'm still paying for it. Well, yes, that's because you pay for the storage. You cannot turn off storage in Azure. You can optimize it, of course, like I mentioned before, but you cannot turn it off. So you're paying for that 24/7, or you can delete it, of course. Be also very careful with Azure logging and Azure logs. Azure logs which are usually stored in a log analytics workspace, they can very quickly add up, and you get a lot of storage logging costs. Johannes knows about that. He's working a lot with Sentinel and logs, and it's a big topic there as well. Auto-scaling configurations, also be careful with that. If you use auto-scaling, so Azure auto-scales your resources, really be careful, set upper limits, be careful with those configurations, because if you're not careful, you suddenly have auto-scaled to, let's say, 2,000 virtual machines, and you just needed 100 or something like that. So be careful with those kind of configurations. And what we also see lately, or what I recently discovered in an article which I read, is coding and API errors. So for example, if you are not careful in your coding and generate, for example, infinite loops, and this infinite loop, for example, creates thousands of API requests, and you're paying for every API request, well, you will get a big bill. And so here be also very careful when coding and doing API requests to Azure. Last section of my talk is those additional tools. Those are just some recommendations which I have, which I use on a daily basis, I would say, and which might be helpful. I already mentioned one tool, which was this Azure Cost Management Control Panel. What I also have included here is this Azure Advisor. Azure Advisor is basically your free cloud consultant, they call it. You get a lot of information there regarding costs, security, resiliency, and your general health state of your Azure environment. And you can see in this bottom screenshot, for example, you can see it recommends me that I enable the reserved instances to save costs for my virtual machine in my environment. It also suggests that I purchase a savings plan maybe, or review disks which are not attached. They're just lying around disks. They're not attached to anything producing costs. So you get those recommendations. And what is also quite new to the workbook, at least for me, it was quite often new. If you go into the advisor to workbooks, so you can see I'm in the workbook section of the advisor. If you go to this cost optimization workbook, which is currently in preview, if you go in here, and then up here, you can see rate optimization and usage optimization. Those are those two formula topics which we talked about. If we check usage optimization, for example, I can see recommendations regarding, for example, my virtual machines. Here it mentions that a virtual machine is stopped, so it's not doing anything. I might think about deleting it. But if we, for example, switch to, let's say, networking. For networking, for example, I could see public IPs here. And I could see these public IPs are unattached. They're just lying around generating costs. They are not even doing anything. So this could be something which is quite helpful, this workbook, because it tells you, okay, here are things where you can optimize your usage. For example, storage accounts. Here I have a lot of storage accounts which are on this previous generation, this V1 generation. So it recommends me, hey, take a look at those storage accounts and maybe consider upgrading them to V2. So it's quite helpful, this workbook, and I recently discovered it. There's also other tools which show you orphaned resources. There's a lot of GitHub open source projects out there. But yeah, I just wanted to mention you this workbook as I think it's quite helpful for your cost optimizations. So that was Azure Advisor. Azure Pricing Calculator is a very common tool. I use it a lot. As a cloud solution architect, you have to design solutions for customers. And yeah, Pricing Calculator is basically a go-to tool. With Pricing Calculator, you can estimate your cloud costs. And yeah, you can calculate, save exports, share your cloud spendings, and so on and so on. For example, you could also, which are highlighted here in the presentation, is this bandwidth egress traffic costs, which are talked about, those costs which are often forgotten. You can also calculate them in the Azure Cost Calculator, or those Azure Private Link costs, which are highlighted here. So you can calculate those there and get an estimation of the cloud costs. It's always important, it's just an estimation. And last but not least, a tool which I regularly also use, or it's not a, it's a tool, but it's a website basically, is cloudprice.net. It's the website which I showed you with this regional overview. Why do I like this website very much? If we take a look at it, cloudprice.net, it's here. If we take a look at it, first of all, it shows multiple different options here. What virtual machines option you have very big filters here. So you can also do regex commands. You can filter your machines. You can actually compare the virtual machines very easily. So you can just select them, compare them, see what sizing they have, what cost comparison. Also the regional price differences you can compare. So it's quite helpful when planning virtual machines actually. You can also choose every data center here. So it has very deep filtering options, I would say. So I can really recommend it. It actually has also for AWS and GCP, some information here. So it's quite helpful. I can really recommend it. Of course, you could also use the Azure Cloud Cost Calculator, but I think in many cases this is superior because for virtual machines, of course, only because you can filter it and it gives you a lot of information. Okay, switching back to my presentation, if it works. Let's see, maybe it doesn't work. There we go. I think that was already my last slide. So thank you very much for listening to my talk, and I hope to see you all soon. And if you have any questions, feel free to come forward now. So
Okay, Colin. Thank you. Thank you for your session, for a really interesting session. A lot of topics, a lot of different sections or configuration steps what you can do to reduce your cost or to analyze your cost. What I want to share with you is an additional workbook what I'm often used to find orphaned resources. I put it to the chat. This is a GitHub project, Asia Orphaned Resources in version 3.0. It's also really, really interesting and a good workbook. It's an open source workbook, but it's useful. Okay, so last session. Balázs, I'm really looking forward about demystifying Asia policies. I love Asia policies. I'm using it a lot. And yeah, I'm really looking forward what you will explain you about Asia policies. But before we start with the session, are there any questions to Colin in case of reduce costs or optimize costs? Okay.
For my end, just 1 point, sorry. So the storage you mentioned, so the SSD disk, so the transaction cost, but I also have an experience with the normal blob storage. So the customer move from hot to archive and they are used the data oftenly. And in that case, the transaction cost was higher than they just keep it in the storage and everything on a hot. So might be if you change the hot, cool, cold, and the archive tiers, you also have to figure it out. So what's the access or how often you need that data? Because in that case, might be just configure it on a proper tier. And I know it's also a big mystical stuff because I'm not sure so anybody knows how you can easily to calculate the transaction cost and all of the other stuff. So that's my 2 cents. But thanks, Colin. That was a very great session.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had another question. Thank you so much, Colin, for your information about that. I would have liked to address the issue about the API loops. Would you have any recommendation to be alerted if there are any issues with those?
I mean, sure. For example, if you use API management, you could, to avoid such situation, you could deploy an API limit, like API rate limiting, it's called in API management. So this would reduce or at least limit the rate of how many simultaneous or multiple API requests you can send to it. And you could also, like I said, this budget alerting. So you would see, okay, there's something going on. You can also set up cost anomaly alerts. So Azure detects if an anomaly occurs, and then you get an alert for that. And what you could also do is, of course, improvement or do change management and so on and so on, of course. So from a coding perspective, there's a lot of things you can do. I hope some of those aspects answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Any more questions, or otherwise I would give the speech again to Johannes.
And I will give it to Balázs.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm just sharing my screen.
Great.
Hope you can see it. So basically what I would like to discuss it today a little bit, so talking about the Azure policy and trying to demystify it. But first thing first, I would like to just introduce myself. So my name is Balázs. I'm a Hungarian guy, but I'm living in Austria 1.5 years. So, and I have an experience with the IT, with the Microsoft technology, more than 25 years, working with Azure since 2012, and I'm a certified trainer as well. My focus area is cloud security and infrastructure. So basically, those things, including landing zones and everything, so which is covering that topic. So I'm really love to talking about that as well. So for today, I would like to show you a lot of demos. If I have time, 3 demos. I'm trying to put it in that 45 minutes. So basically, cloud, I would like to just talk about a little bit the cloud governance, so why it matters, or how does it working, so the policy and what's the key and core components of that, how you need to work with the policies if you started. So I'm trying to give you in a curve, so and also in an outlook. So what's the point here? What's the major points and how you can start it and how you can build up your policies, and end of that. So I try to give you how the policy and the policy as a code is able to covering if you have a lot of tenants, or if you would like to just managing your environment and infra as a code, or based on the CI/CDs. So first thing first, what are the common customer mistakes? What I see, so Microsoft give a lot of guidance like Azure landing zones, but sometimes it's not working because the customers starting very complex and doing and following that guidance, which is fine, but Microsoft also offer a lot of different landscapes and architecture from landing zone perspective as well. So if you have a small or mid-sized company, you don't need to build your big rocket ship or something like that. So if you have in a smaller environment, you're just using in a smaller infrastructure for that means so you don't need to prepare a tons of management groups, so you can reduce that and keep it simple. Another big point, so the opportunity. So if you have, so just trying to use the bare minimum. So after that, you can easily to build up, and you can easily to extend the number of the policies or the complexity of your infrastructure. But first thing first, I guess, try to keep it simple, as I mentioned. So another point is the enforcement, or a lot of exclusions, so which is a lot of legs on that. So it's also not a good point you just deploying a tons of policies, and after that you trying to reduce the effect of that if you have a lot of deny policies or given an exemption, but just because the guys mentioned, oh, it's not working, we are not able to deploy our infrastructure, just the customer story, then an external team just provided their infra as a code that was, I don't know, more than 130 lines, and that was just on a small stuff, but they also trying to deploy later than more than 1,000 lines infra as a code, and after the 3 or 4 lines, everything is stopped because they are not following the landing zone concept, and the answer was, oh, it's something which is working in another customer. That's fine, but please check it as well. And if you saying in that case, okay, I give you a lot of exemption, I give a lot of stuff which is supporting your code, that's fine, but later then it's not too easy to turn it back, and the security perspective or compliance perspective, it's not a good thing. So just jump into the governance. What's the general governance things, and what's the point here? What are the key pillars? And mostly 2 big things coming here on the picture. One is the Azure policy, and another one is the role-based access control. But those are not, so just helping each other. So if you have something what you have to configure by policy, that's fine. But if you have something or a different stuff, and that's something what I would like to try to also explain a little bit later. Then, so was the scope of the policies and what the scope of the role-based access control. But first thing first, the governance and the security is a critical for the Azure environment, and please try to not in an accidental deployment of our Azure landscape. So you just requesting a subscription, trying to do your own, and after that, so if the security check it, or you have somebody else who can review that and say, so it looks good, but it's a lot of things which is not fitting for the security compliance requirements. So please thinking a little bit planning before you are starting the deployment of your infrastructure. And that's something where the role-based access control Azure policy, I guess, can help very easily. So the traditional approach, and that was also something what I saw in I don't know, 5-10 years ago, there's a lot of guys who trying to use the cloud. There was a developers, operational guys, application owners, but that wasn't a central team who was responsible for the cloud environment. So every single deployment is going through that team. The capacity of the team was not too high, so the throughput was very low. That means that every single deployment was take more time and longer than they are just using the on-prem infrastructure. And that was something why I'm saying, so okay, it's something which is working, but it's not scalable and not so good. And after that, so if we are focusing a little bit and trying to figure out how can we automate it and how can we use that cloud native governance tools like policy or role-based access control, in that case, we can preparing in a very good control plane for that. That means so the developers, operational teams, app owners can create their own infrastructure, configuration, and so on. And the cloud team is not responsible for that. They'll take over or walking through all of that kind of implementation. They are just responsible for the controls. And if the infrastructure as a code or the deployment of that infrastructure is going through that role-based access control and policy controlled how can I say, so that control points, in that case, that infrastructure is something which is fitting for the requirements, fitting for the security or compliance needs, and so on and so on. So that's something with I'm thinking so it's a very good point here. So please use policies and role-based access control instead of just growing your team who's responsible to deploy in an infrastructure which is not maintained or owned by that team. So it's absolutely in another developer environment, or it's in a core application which is operated in or the application team, but you are deploying it because nobody knows how can do that, and you're just afraid of so the infrastructure end of the day is not fitting for that governance or security needs. So what does it mean? So role-based access control and Azure policy. Role-based access control means so who can do what. So it's a permission, it's an access control for that. If you have an owner or contributor permission or role-based access control on the resource group or the subscription level, I can create mostly everything, and I can configure everything, including resource creation, permission, and also everything. So I can creating and removing or upgrading resources in the subscription. If I have an Azure policy, it's something which is at top of that role-based access control. That means so what is allowed. So what you can doing. So the VM creation is not denied by the policy, and you have a permission. You can easily create your own virtual machine storage account and so on. But for example, if you try to create your virtual machine in the central use region, which is restricted by policy, you cannot do that, because the policy says, oh, that's something what you cannot do in here. So I would like to explain not just that kind of deny type of the policy, because the policy has a lot of different effects, but that's the big difference of it. So if you have a permission, but the policy say no, you cannot do that. If the policy say yes, but you don't have a permission, in that case, you are not able to create that kind of resource or modify that kind of configuration of the resource. So that's something what I'm trying to always explain. Please do not use just the role-based access control because it's easy, or it's just something what you know because the on-prem Active Directory, you also create groups and also create your access control list. Nope. If you would like to do something which is in a global setting and you would like to enforce all of the resources, resource groups, or subscription level, please use the role-based access control, but please check the policy, and the policy 99% take over that kind of global stuff, global configuration, global denying, or something like that. But as I mentioned, policy is not just blocking that kind of stuff. So jumping to the next, how does it work? What's the aim of the policy? So the core concept is we have a policy definition, where that definition we just saying so what we would like to and when we would like to apply that kind of policies and what kind of effect what should be taken of it. It's a deny policy, it's an audit policy, modify, and so on and so on. So what we would like to do with that. So might be I just blocking something, I want to modify something, that configuration is changed, and I would like to change all of that kind of setting for the whole of the tenant level, for example. So yeah, I can easily to modify that kind of stuff. Or you are deploying something and you are not covering everything, for example, in a tag, or you didn't deploy it in a diagnostic settings, no worries. Policy can jump in there and configuring that kind of central or stuff, for example, sending all of the audit logs to the central local analytics workspace. It's a deploy if not exist policy mostly, if you are not covering with the for example, your infra as a code, or you're not clicking through that on the portal. So if you have policy definition, that's fine. But if you would like to use the policy, mostly is not in a good way if you just put it on the subscription level or the resource level one by one. If you have something what you would like to managing as a group, so denying SQL database has for example, in a public endpoint, or you would like to also set some kind of other SQL related stuff. In that case, you just create in a group, name is initiative. So you can add that kind of policies in one group, and you can easily to enforce, you can easily to assign that kind of initiative on the resource level, resource group level, or higher. So Microsoft also give in a lot of built-in policy and initiative as well. But if you have something what you would like to group in or creating your own policy, yeah, you have an opportunity to create your own custom policy or custom initiative. So that's something what you can do, and later then I would like to explain a little bit that as well. So the next point, the effects. As I mentioned, there is a lot of different effects. For example, deny is preventing resourcing, creation, or updating the resource, some kind of configuration, which is not fitting for the rules, for the security or compliance rules. Audit and audit if not exist, so that two policies easily to check. It's a, for example, it's a compliant resource, or the configuration, something which is happened so that way what the company would like to see. For example, the storage account has some kind of HTTP configuration, or it's available only HTTPS, and not enforcing right now the HTTPS, but you would like to see so how many resources you have it which is not compliant, or if you would like to check anything else, so it's easily to do that. Another one is the append. It's working with the tags. So if you need additional tags, you can use the append effects, and in that case, you can easily to provide that kind of additional text on the resource level. Modify, as I mentioned, that's something which is help to enforce some kind of configuration, compliance, and things and so on. So the modify, the name mentioned, so it's something what you need to use if you want to modify some kind of configuration, so that the developers deploying in a storage account with a public access, you can easily to modify it to use just selecting network or totally disable that kind of stuff. In that case, it's not a deny policy, so the deployment will be going through it that way, but the modify can be switched that configuration for the proper way. And also the pair of it is the deploy if not exist. So if you create something without any configuration which is needed from security, compliance, or tagging, or any kind of stuff, so in that case, it's easily to add that kind of things. So you don't need to just notify the resource owner. So guys, it looks promising, but please add the dynasty setting, the tags, and so on. No, this is something which is a central service or a central requirements. In that case, you can easily enforce that kind of configuration using deploy if not exists. So the resource created after approximately 10 minutes. So the deploy if not exist is coming and also and configuring that kind of stuff which is missing from the resource. So audit if not exists is the same as the audit, but is checking so something is not configured what we would like. So that's easy, and quite new, around a little bit more than I think so a year ago. So the deny action is also be there, and my demo is covering that. So if you have something what you would like to so you configured it as a central things like a diagnostic settings or the VNet peer. You want also, and you want to protect it so nobody can delete it, that kind of link or that kind of diagnostic settings. So you can use the deny action. That means so the resource owner able to configure other diagnostic settings or peering stuff, but they are not able to remove that central diagnostic settings, which is sending the audit logs to the central log analytics workspace, or they are not able to remove the peering, which is connected to the hub network. And in that case, it's easy to protect it, that kind of data. The manual, it's just an it's working with the manual attestation of the compliance, for example, and the disable effect means so the policy is not affecting on that resource or that kind of resource or resource group, so based on the scope. So that's the basic effects. And as I mentioned, I have a short demo for that, for the deny action. And I have two policy here, and I hope I can switch easily. So I have that small environment. I have a hub network, I have a spoke network. So if I'm going to the hub and check the peerings, I have a peering name spoke 1, hub spoke 1, and I have the same configuration for the spoke network as well, so the same name. And in the policy, I have that deny VNet peer removal. That means, so as you see, it's compliance status is protected. And if I'm just opening that, so it's easily to get, okay, come on. Yeah, so you can see there is the name of it. And if I'm checking the assignment itself, it's a policy which is blocking mainly. So if the name of the peering is a specific name as a parameter, in that case, I'm not able to deleting that. So right now, sorry, I need to put it here. So where is my, so the effect is deny action and the peering name hub spoke 1. So if I'm coming back here to the spoke, for example, and going to the peering, and I'm trying to delete this one, I'm just typing, I'm an owner in the subscription, so I can do anything. And if I'm starting the deletion, I got that error message because it's disallowed because we have that policy deny VNet peering removal because it's blocking. But if I'm creating another peering here, for example, test 1, I'm just pick it up, not this, for example, another one here, and test 1, and adding it. So the name is not what the policy protecting. Another point, you can use or modify that policy to the ID of the central hub network. And in that case, it's not depends on the name, it depends on the other side. So if the one side is contains the hub, so you're not able to delete that. So that's also something what you can do. But yeah, so it's fully synchronized. But if I'm clicking here and trying to delete it, and I can type it correctly, I hope it will be deleting easily without any blocking. because I have a permission to create, I have a permission to delete, but I also, the policy is not jumping to that because it's something which is working properly, and it's just blocking the name, which is hub spoke one. And if I'm going to the log analytics workspace, I have another policy here. I'm just showing to that. So there's a deny action. Both are custom policies, but that's something what I'm just creating. Also, the effect is deny action. And the assignment, it's if the diagnostic setting name is central log, you are not able to deleting that. So if I'm jumping to back here, you can see the central log, and I'm trying to going here and deleting that. I can't because it's disallowed by the policy. But if you creating another one, which is, I don't know, name test one again, or logs, forwarding to log analytics workspace, yeah, that's fine. But the Canadian is Sweden Central is also fine. Save it. You can easily to save it. So the resource owner, what happened here? Conflict. Okay, sorry. Just configured on things on the same way. So, okay. That's good. Okay, I'm just saving that one. I hope it will be green. So the resource owner has a permission to create their own log analytics workspace and sending the data to their own one, but they are not able to delete the central one, but they can easily going back and deleting that without any blocking. So because it's not fitting for that. So the cases here, you can protecting the central enforced stuff, including VNet peering diagnostic settings or some kind of storage accounts. You can also type of resources you can protect it, which is in, I don't know, it's in another resource group and so on and so on. So there the usage is a, I think so, not just for the VNet peering and diagnostic setting, but that's easily to configure that part as well. So that was just a short demo for that. Yes, sorry.
I have a short question. What do you recommend? So when I think about infrastructure as code, with infrastructure as code, when I'm using Bicep, it's possible to implement the infrastructure as code over deployment stacks. And with deployment stacks, I also have the ability to protect my resources that are deployed. What do you recommend? Do you recommend to do this over policies, or do you recommend to use a mix between infrastructure as code, deployment stacks, and policies?
A mix of it, absolutely a mix of it. So the code here, it's something what you so the code, if you are just creating your infrastructure and you're responsible for that specific log analytics workspace and the specific configuration, which is yours. So in your subscription, that's something which you can easily to manage by infra as a code. But that kind of central related stuff, so which is coming from the central control plane, including that peering, diagnostic settings, or for example, an enforcement of the Defender for Cloud implementation, so that kind of enablement of the Defender for Cloud. So those things are better if you are protected and enforcing by policy. Because if somebody just creating a new resource, deleting it and recreated that, so the policy continuously protected, that means recreating the diagnostic settings or recreating that kind of centrally managed or enforced stuff.
What could be a really good use case to protect is routing tables on subnets, because it's really a pain when you have your landing zone, for example, and there is a customer who has, for example, contributor mission. It's really easy to remove the route table, assign a NAT gateway, and have a direct connection to the internet. This is
exactly. That's also a very good example. Yes, sure. Yes.
Okay.
And that's why I'm just trying to enforce the customers to use the virtual one and using BGP. And in that case, we don't care about the routing table anymore. But yeah, I know. So it's also on the table. But yeah, thanks for that. So just in a short overview how the policy looks like. So there's the metadata information, name, some kind of description, versions, category, and the type of it, and the parameters. That means so if it's what's the effect, so what kind of effect in the policy. If you want, so you can add it as a deny action, for example, that VNet peering, or is disabled. But there, as I mentioned, so also there are little, so also having an opportunity of more effects here. But in that case, for example, the deploy if not exists is it's not understandable here. So it's something what you can use for here is a deny action and disable, and the default is a deny action. So for other hand, you can see so the default variant hub to spoke, but if you have some kind of naming convention, you can easily to change it or switch that name of the peering to some kind of, I don't know, ID, which is a static one. And after that coming the rule itself. So if that kind of VNet peering and the name of the VNet peering is, in that case, spoke to hub, and you try to delete it, so the action what you're trying to do is a delete. In that case, the policy says no, because it's a deny action for the deletion. So that's the structure of it. If you have a complex parameters, mostly it can be easily, but depends on how many parameter would like to put in there. But the rules also can be very, very, very complex. If you would like to check not just that one, if you would like to check in a sub resource, and if the sub resource is also have that kind of metric and so on and so on. So it can be in a complex one. So, but it's a simple one right now, and it's something which is, I guess, easily to understand. So the next one is the policy effect and the processing order. If you have a disable, that's the prior one. So if you disable something, it's not affected. Up and then a modify coming next. And after the deny, audit, manual, deploy, audit if not existent, and the last one is the deny action. So if you have something what you trying to managing in one way and you just creating another one for another effect, in that processing order, just jump in and that happening with it. So not just so not depends on that in for the which is closer to the resource. So it's also actually processed by that. So it's also an important for if you are creating a complex policy stuff. And one thing for which also important is the managed identity. Managed identity step in the picture if you have a modify and the deploy if not exist policies, because you need some kind of user in that case who can execute that kind of stuff. So the modification and the deploy if not exist related stuff. And the managed identity, it's a good option for that. You can use system assigned managed identity, and you can easily to reuse that for the so minimal risk for the reuse of that, because it's connected to the resource itself. But if you have a user assigned managed identity, you can easily to reuse that kind of managed identity many times. You can also have to give a permission. So, for example, if you want to do something which is related with the network, you need to provide for that managed identity network contributor role, but you don't need to give an owner one. So please use the least privilege access model in that case as well. So that's also important. But yeah, managed identity can help for that case and then easily to manage that, but only for the modified deploy if not exists. You don't need it for the deny. You don't need it for the audit, just for the modification stuff, modify and deploy if not exist. And one big part, I guess, so where you need to, or what's the best option to assign the policy. I work with the several customers before. They are managed everything on the resource group level or subscription level. It works, but if you need to modify something, I think so you will suffering to modify a lot of things there or remove or reconfigure the policy. So you see that landing zone concept here, the landing zone management group structure, and please put the highest level where is easily to manage. If you would like to use all of the subscription, in that case, just using the Contoso or the tenant root. But I think so the Contoso level in that case, so it's a good option. If you would like to just use some kind of policies on the sandbox, use the management group for the sandboxes, and so on and so on. So the central managed stuff you can easily to put in the highest level on the Contoso level. The reason why I'm not recommend to use the tenant root management group is because you can easily to close out yourself from your environment. So that's also the reason why the Microsoft says so. Just create one layer down from the tenant root management group and use that for the highest level. I saw the same situation, another customer, and yeah, that was a long story, a lot of pizzas and beers. So what we have to spend, so figuring out how can we moving back and take a control back for that. So policy inheritance, it's working. If you put something in the Contoso level or the landing zone level, it's going down to the resources, which is in that subscription level inside the corp or online. Same as the group policy. The different, you're not able to block the inheritance right now, so you cannot add that kind of blocking stuff here. Just using it's going down and rolling to the resource level. So and one point here, if you have a resource group, for example, in the landing zone, and you would like to move it to the sandbox or opposite side, the role-based access control and the policy which is inherited from the management group level, it's not traveling with that. So if you're moving that resource or resource group or subscription from sandbox management group, for example, to the corp, new policies will be arrived and affected on that. Role-based access control is also not traveling if you not assigned it directly to the subscription or the resource group. So the management group level things is not traveling with it. It's enforced and arrive in the new policy set or role-based access control for that. So yeah, it's something which is a tricky part, but yeah, I think so. The first time you will see that, so it's changing and it's sometimes it's not a problem. Versioning, Microsoft offering policy versioning. Why it's good? Because you can easily to track the changes. If the new version is not fitting to you, you can easily to roll back or using an older version of it. It's not a problem, but Azure is changing, and the policy also following that those kind of changes. In that case, you can check so which policies are on your side. If you assign it, you can check it. So use in a specific version, or you would like to use the latest and greatest of the version of the policy. So you can easily to do that. Yeah, that's the reason. I think so. It's very useful. I also check it. That was on a policy which is affected to the storage account, and the oldest version was fine, and the newest version is not fit to that customer. So we just roll back and use the older one, and we have to change the environment itself, and later then it works. So that's fine. So working with the Azure policies, how can I start? First thing first, please try to use the built-in policies. You have a tons of it. If you need a list of it, I think so. That's more than 3 days to walking through all of that. So it's a tons of. If you would like to or not familiar for the policies, use the audit effect. It's not modify or change anything. It's just auditing, and you see so your environment is fine or not, fitting or not, that kind of requirements or not, and it's easily as a safe testing for that. Organize custom or your policies to initiatives easily to it's better and easiest way to assign to the management group level or the subscription level. Monitor the compliance with the dashboard, or policy has their own compliance also dashboard for that. I'm not sure it's the best one. Sometimes it's very slow, but yeah, so the good work, you need more time. So you waiting for sometimes just 10 or 15 minutes to see all of the updates, but it will be coming, but you have more, so give them a little bit more time. And the remediation, if you would like to remediate, use the automatic remediation. For that, you need the proper managed identity or service principal, but for that, you can use that. So if you want to enforce deploy if not exist or modify effects, you just use the managed identity and use the automatic correction by that deploy if not exist or modify effects. Which policy for what? Audit or audit if not exist if you want monitoring. Deny if you would like to strict the controls, so stop that kind of activities at that kind of location usage or and so on and so on. And modify and deploy if not exist if you want to remediate something. So just an example, if you're using the audit, you can easily to check. So if you change the policy from audit to modify, your environment will be broken or not, because the policy will be modify something or just saying everything is fine, everything is compliant. And yeah, so the deny policy, as I mentioned, if you want to, for example, enforcing use Western Europe or Austrian East or in specific location or specific configuration, or you would like to deny to use large VMs or anything else, so you can easily to say no for that. You have an owner permission, but don't care about it because the policy will blocking that kind of activity. So just an example, audit for reporting, it's a no enforcement, for example, missing text. Modify, auto-fixing, add the text automatically. Deploy if not existing, missing something, enforcement for that, and add the monitoring if it's not present. Deny, block that kind of non-compliant resource creation. That's all. So easily to identify which is going where. And one more thing, Jan, as you mentioned, Bicep. Right now, I'm just talking about a little bit the Terraform, because that's also a very funny stuff. You, as a developer, create your infrastructure, you set everything, the policy is coming and modify. And the next apply, you changing back, and the policy coming and changing back again. So it could be in a loop. Sometimes I see the developer say, so, okay, how can I modify it, or what's the point here? And the key word here is the ignore changes. So if you have a Terraform code and you would like to avoiding to changing back the things which, for example, the policy change with the tag, network rule, or something like that, use that policy friendly stuff like lifecycle and ignore changes. I have just a short demo for that here. So I have a storage account. The storage account configured to enable everything and adding that IP address here. If I'm just changing to, for example, disable and save it, and I have an infrastructure as a code here, which deploying the Terraform, it's a Terraform code. And as you see, the default action is deny and so on and so on. So if I'm just disable right now, or yeah, just keep it on that, or enable is also fine. Keep it at that, that's also good. And if I'm going back to the pipelines and running it again, run. So it's just check the configuration itself and apply the changes, because it's different what the Terraform said before. So the point is here, it will be running, and I would after that I wanna showing you. So what happens? But if I'm coming here and removing that part, so the life cycle ignore changes, network rules, or public network access enabled, or all nested rules, and so on and so. So I'm just saying, okay, I just wanna enable the policy or somebody else to configure it. If I'm removing that and run it and changing the resource again and are running the Terraform again, so basically that's something which is so not affected. So it's not changing back by the Terraform. And same for the tags. If you would like to add the tags, just ignore changes text, and in that case you can easily add the tags. I have one for the environment dev, so there's the tag here, but if I'm adding a new one, or by policy or manually, so it's not changing back. So the key point is here, it's the life cycle and that kind of changes. Just jumping back. Okay, it's running. I hope it will be finishing fast. Okay, it's running the apply. And I hope it will be changing back that setting from disable. And if I'm managing the IP address, for example, changing the IP address, that's something which is also working. Okay, it looks like it's fine. Just hit the refresh. Sometimes it's needed. And I hope it's changing back, as you see, from deny to enable. And if I'm adding that another IP, the Terraform will be removing that. But right now, I'm just adding another one. This one. And if I'm going back here to the files, to the firewalling stuff, editing this, and just removing. And I hope it's fine. Okay, everything is be there. So if I'm coming back to here, okay, it's hit it automatically because I'm changed the code. So I hope that setting, what I'm configured here, so adding that IP, that will be something which will keep and not removing for that. So that's the ignore change stuff. And I hope it's just okay, applying. Okay, it's finished because they didn't find anything which has changed. Okay, apply is not starting yet, but I hope it's saying so everything is fine. Can it apply? Come on, guys. Okay, apply is also be there. Just refresh it. And if I'm click to the here, as you see, IP already there. So it's not changed back by the pipeline in the Terraform. So that's the aim of the life cycle and the indoor changes. If you are using Terraform, use this small trick, I guess. Yep. So that was the change of it, and not the latest. So exemption. So what I see a lot of customer using that, but for what? If you have a permanent one because you need additional, or if you have additional security safeguard for that, fine. If it's a temporarily because you need to fix your code, redeploy it, configure it, and after that you change, so removing the exemption and the policy will be going back. That's fine. What I also see the metadata. Why you made that exemption, who was the approval, and some kind of ticket ID. It's very, very useful and very, very beneficial for the security and anybody else, because in that case you can easily to check it. So why does the exemption be there? So please use the comment section here. Orphaned, so if you have a policy and delete it, so you need to clean up. So yes, please going back and removing that exemptions as well. And the preview feature for that, so the user base exemption, caller type enforcement, and IP filter, it's on the way. I don't know where it will be available for public preview, but it's just I don't know, last year that was an announcement on some kind of Microsoft event. That might be, I don't know which one, but yeah, that was an announcement, and yeah, that's something which is coming. So I'm thinking so that was a build 2025. I hope it will be arriving because there's also very good stuff. So if the user is part of that group or that user trying to do that, the exemption will be there. If anybody, anybody else, so the policy will be applying. So yeah, it's a good stuff. And custom policies. Today in my demo, I'm used all of the policies as a custom policy, but as I mentioned, there are tons of built-in. But if you cannot see or not fitting your needs, you would like to change something, yeah, you can use the custom policies, but not as a, yeah. So please do not reinvent the wheel. Try to find your policy and the built-in policies, and if it's not fine for you, just after that, just going there and create your own one. But it's absolutely fine. Using a kind of naming standards, using a kind of so for example, if you would like to enforcing a naming standards or tagging standards or diagnostic settings, backup, monitoring stuff, yeah, you can use your own custom policies, but 99% of that available as a built-in. Couple of years ago, Azure landing zone policies, so that I don't know, 1,000 of that was in a custom policy. Right now, all of it is available as a built-in one. So you don't need to use that, but if you want, so yeah, you can easily to do that. And the last topic, policy as a code. Microsoft, yeah, it's also in a Microsoft GitHub story. So that means, so it's not an official Microsoft solution, but it's developed by the Microsoft guys, and enterprise policy as a code, EPAC. Why it could be good for you? You can easily create two different section of your tenant. You can creating in a developer section for that. That means so you can easily to check and test your policies, and you can create the productive pillar of your tenant, and you can use it. So if you want to test something, you can easily to test it on the test hive, but easily to move it or apply it to the production one. You don't need different tenants, but if you are working in a multi-tenant environment, you can also use the enterprise policy as a code. Everything is based on the DevOps, but you can use the policies and the enforcement and everything, and you can use the CI/CD pipelines, Azure DevOps pipelines, or GitHub Actions. Or another way, you can use the PowerShell commandlets, because behind of the EPAC, so there is a tons of PowerShell modules and PowerShell commandlets. So you can easily to implement, but the documentation, if you start to read it, it's not, I guess it's not too easy to understand. So what's the first step? The good news, if you have a new tenant, you can easily to deploy it and create your own solution for that. But if you have a tons of policies assignments, you can export it to the enterprise policy as a code, and you can use that kind of policy on the same way later then. That means so you don't need to delete your policies, exemption, and everything. You just exported it. The enterprise policy is a code able to manage it. So pull in all of that information. And after that, you can see everything, all of those policies and assignments as a JSON file, but you can easily to add, remove, change the scope, and so on. So how does it work in? as I mentioned, that there's two different pipeline for that. So one is the developer stuff for the feature branch. You can test it, your policy assignment and everything. And you can, if it's working, after that, you can easily to move it or apply it on the production one. You don't need to have two different tenants. Everything is happening in one. But yeah, so if you have multiple, so you can easily to do that. How does it looks like? So I'm just showing you. I'm just importing and creating my own tenant and creating that exporting the current policy sets and also adding the landing zone related stuff. But right now, there's the structure. You need to have a definition. After that, the assignment. So you can use that assignment for the NIST SP 853. That's for the Microsoft security benchmark. That was the deny peering stuff. So the policy what I'm demoed. So what I'm showing you in the demo one, it's something which is coming from here. And also I can modify the name of it. And this is just the assignment. The policy definition storing in a different way. So here is the deny VNet peering removal policy itself. So you can see deny action and so on and so on. So all of the parameters and everything. So if you have an exemption, there is two different high. One is the developer stuff and another one is the tenant, is a production one. And if you have policy definitions, so set definitions, the initiatives, you can also easily storing here. And that's the tricky part. So I have just one tenant. The productive one is starting after the root management group name is Bolaget.80, and that's the demo one where I test in my policies. So if I'm take a look on the management group structure, is just deploying right now. So there is the productive hive or thread of the of that, and that's the demo one. So where you can easily to test your policies. And if I'm take a look in here and clicking to the policy, I hope we have 3 policies. As I mentioned, NIST, the default Defender stuff. I have the PCI DSS as well, and here you see the deny VNet peering removal. All of that stuff arrived by using the EPAC. And if I would like to remove in from here that the assignment, for example, I'm just removing this one or that one and rerun the pipeline. The pipeline is just starting the removal or so the changes, processing the changes, and so it will be removing easily. So that's the policy as a code. So if you want to use and testing the policy in one tenant, you can do that. If you have multiple tenants, you can also use that. So if you have a provider and you have a lot of customers and you would like to enforce and using one code base for all of that because you are responsible for that, yeah, you're just creating that one and easily to enforce in tenant by tenant and so on. So key takeaways: airbag plus the policy is a full control for you. Applying policies in a high in the hierarchy, so please try to assign all of it on the management group level and use initiatives for the easily to scalable for that. Starting small and growing, so you don't need to deploy all of that thousands of policies just because it's available. So use that, and you can easily to grow in. So final tips: explore the compliance in the Azure portal, use the policy insights, and if you have any questions, so please let me know. And thanks for your attention and thanks for your time, guys.
Okay, great. Thank you. Really interesting. So the enterprise policy as a code, yeah, it's it's really tricky to implement, but it's a cool tool.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah, we are not so much people right now in the Teams call, so but nevertheless, I think the sessions was really good. All 3 sessions were awesome. Yeah, are there some questions, Wolfgang or Cedric? Colin?
I have a small question regarding policy remediation. You mentioned that it's possible to automate them. I've done the automation for Azure policies usually with an automation account where
Yes.
the automation account triggers the remediation and then it remediates. Is that also your approach, or do you have other approaches as well?
No, that's something which is absolutely fine. So yeah, an automation account to running that remediation task is absolutely fine. The crucial point is here. So you need to create the necessary permission and that kind of managed identity or service principal to have that kind of stuff. But yeah, absolutely, automation account and automation stuff. Yeah, it's absolutely make your life easier. Yes, exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Are there any other questions?
I think it was very interesting and very intense. So thank you for the for all the insights, Balázs. I think I'm already pretty tired for today, so I'll thank you, and I'll have to head home to my family. But it was very helpful, very good experience for me, and it will help us in our development. So thanks for that, and I'm looking forward for further invitations to your sessions. That was really nice.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So yeah, from the future perspective, I hope we are organizing soon the next Experts Live meetup. Maybe a hybrid version in Vienna, or maybe Colin in Graz. I have no problem with this. Yeah, so thank you for all the speakers. So we are right now 2 speakers. So Stefan have left the call. So thank you for everything, and I will now stop the recording. So stop recording.